This meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board to order. Everybody for attendance. 2.02 certification of closed session. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Zombie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Any discussion? Ms. Aller?
Ms. Zombie.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye. Thank you. 3.01, the roll is roll. Ms. Aller, could you call the roll, please?
Dr. Beers.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Dowell.
Here.
Ms. Hummel. Ms. Owenby.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here. Thank you. 3.02, approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Dowell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may, it says here in the citizens' comments that 30 minutes is allotted, but prior to the gaveling in, you suggested that more than that, so I think we should just have that in the meeting minutes that you've extended that today.
Okay. That is fine. We're allotting 3 minutes per speaker. Any more discussion? Ms. Aller?
Mr. Dowell.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel. Ms. Owenby. Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye. Thank you. 4.01, announcements, superintendent's report. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report this evening shares highlights from our first week of school. As you know, we welcomed students back a week earlier than usual this school year, and so far we've had a wonderful start. Even with their masks on, you can see the excitement of our students, teachers, and staff. Students are either spread out to the greatest extent possible in classrooms or grouped in pods to limit close contacts where possible. As with every school year, we've had a few transportation delays. They were more significant this year because of the national and local bus driver shortage. The good news is that we overall improved afternoon transport times by 50 minutes during the first 4 days of school. We currently have 10 drivers in training, and we are interviewing 9 others this week. So we're hopeful that efficiency should continue to improve this week. Last week, I visited classrooms at every school in the school division, and at each building I saw teaching, learning, and relationship building. As I shared with staff during our annual convocation, it is essential that every student gets what they need when they need it with urgency, now more than ever. I am proud to report that this work has already started in earnest. And speaking of convocation, I want to end my report this evening with a video that first played there. It underscores what we believe, hope to accomplish together, and who we are as a school community. Please take a look.
We believe in our students.
All children.
Fresh start, second chances, never giving up, and hope. Our teachers, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria administrators will do whatever it takes. Strong and believe you.
Together towards classrooms and schools where everyone feels valued.
We can create schools where they feel safe and part of the WJCC's. Engage students and encourage them to take an active role in their learning.
We celebrate victories, big and small.
We advocate for children, funding for ourselves and each other.
We are kind.
We can make a difference. Hope prepare me for the future. Stay with a smile. You're student focused, are resourceful and giving.
Our lifelong learners and teachers and collaborators.
We're committed, caring, and confident in our abilities. We are resilient. You are a champion and a cheerleader. some, you are a safe place and a warm meal. You are my hero.
Our bears,
Bumblebees,
bulldogs, eagles,
dolphins, we are spiders,
rams,
penguins, cardinals, our hawks,
patriots,
roadrunners, bright beginnings, tigers,
lions.
sea stars. We are WJCC.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report for this evening.
I love that video. It's kind of what brings us all to the table, I think, is, I think that's great. Any other comments from, questions from board members? I know the transportation issues are always a challenge at the beginning of the year, and they were certainly more so even this year. Lots of folks who were driving their kids to school, which just kind of interfere with the flow, and so I appreciate that we're making continued strides to improve that as we go forward. So, do you happen to know how many school bus violators that we had?
I believe it was over 200, is that correct, in the first beginning of school?
In the first week, 200?
How much of that money do we get?
I struggle to understand. But
We can get you more information on that, but
I'm just
obviously.
I'm just curious about that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
so Dr. Heron, and maybe I was planning to ask Mr. Kiefer this in the forward, what are we calling it now? Return to Learn, Forward WJCC Schools. But I was curious about an update on the third-party busing. So I don't know if you want to update us now, or I can ask Mr. Kiefer.
Yeah,
in
I
that
think
section.
we'll hold all questions that are outside of the announcements until Forward WJCC Schools.
Sounds great. Any other questions? Ms. Young?
Yes, I mean, you mentioned the word violators. Do you want to explain that to the public, what we're talking about?
We have cameras installed on our school buses to take pictures of people who pass the school bus with the stop arm extended. And so we had 200 of those or so the first week of school, which is somewhat disappointing considering the danger that creates for our students.
Oh, don't do it.
It's been illegal since Henry Ford was a baby, so. Yeah. Anyway, but thank you, Mrs. Young. Any other announcements for this point? That takes us to citizens' comments. Tonight, as Mr. Dowell will review, we're allowing 3 minutes per speaker. Citizens are required to wear the masks while they're inside school buildings, and James Blair is certainly a school building. So if you do not wear a mask, you will be removed from the property. So, Mr. Dowell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So those citizens desiring to speak have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. The citizens are asked to not engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings. Therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments are heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to make their presentation. The board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. And as our chair also mentioned, masks are required while inside the building and while speaking. And our first speaker is going to be Miss Debbie and Mr. Dimitri Chikaritis.
Two speakers?
Hi, how are you guys? I'm Debbie Chichitopoulos. This is my son, Dimitri. We have an issue with his riding the bus. He loves riding the bus, and he has no bus. A white van picked him up last Monday, and two people were in it. One was a man and a woman, a man and a wife. So I followed them to school. The second day, I asked the man said he was grabbing things, the windows, the doors. And I said to him, he needs an aide in the back. And he replied to me and said, he doesn't get paid enough for that. So I said to him, well, tomorrow you won't get paid because Demi's not going on the bus. Demi loves riding the bus. He needs full assistance in school and out of school. Demi was outside at the school bus the other day, and the teacher said to the aide, leave Demi for a few minutes until the bus pulls away, because Demi was upset that he wasn't on that bus. So the teachers put up curtains in the windows so he couldn't see the bus. Because he was getting stressed, he wasn't on the bus. But, I mean, with special needs kids, they like a routine, constant routine. And once they're off that routine, the whole summer he's been waiting to go on the bus. The whole summer. Jimmy, would you like to go to school? What would you do at school? What would you ride on school? Would you like to go on the bus? No. He said no, but he does. This is Demi's last year of school, and there's nothing after he gets out of school. There's no programs, no nothing. So we're trying to just make him happy. He has a disorder where he's going to pass away age about 25. It's called MEPC2 duplicate syndrome. And as a mother, it kills me that he can't ride that bus. Because I try my best to do everything I can to make his memories and his life happy. And I do have 2 questions. Is there an aide supposed to be on the bus with these kids? And also, do you know or do you have any family members that have special needs kids? And that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Rick Timberlake.
Good evening. I've come to address the school board as a resident of James City County and as a former graduate of this institution. I graduated from this school in 1973. I was a lab aide half a block down this building. I've come to talk about the future of education, not necessarily the past. A great country has no resource more precious than its children, its next generation. The school board has an obligation to keep this great society, this great nation going. And it cannot keep going if it is taught to be divisive and self-important, only concerned about itself and how comfortable it is. The curriculum that is being taught in these schools nowadays, despite the mass policy. The mass policy is a shame because it's unpredictable, because people use whatever kind of fear-mongering they need to do to be able to make us have to shut ourselves off from each other. The curriculum has to be improved towards teaching children to be better citizens, not just better robots for what some people consider to be their idea of what is a proper curriculum. I wish you would take into your planning the fact that children need to be guided. I get that. My school education here, it taught me pride and unity. It taught me the best way of being a citizen within this community. It didn't prepare me a whole lot for college, but it did prepare me for being a much better citizen. And that's the obligation for anyone. The leaders, the managers, the workers, the representatives of our next generation are here. You have an obligation to do them right. Failing to do so, failing to put the right kind of curriculum in front of these children is your failure. Not mine, yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timberlake.
Miss Susan Franz. Miss Kendall Garan.
Good evening, everybody. I spoke at the last school board meeting, and I was kind of disappointed to hear that the board felt that applause was disrespectful. Applause is utilized in every corner of society to show respect, appreciation, agreement, and support. What I thought was disrespectful was the disdain many on this board showed to the people who took the time from their day to convey their concerns. You work for us, we don't work for you. If you don't want to hear from we the people, then maybe you should step aside to make room for those who value public opinion and our children. I don't care which side of the aisle your politics lean, you should be willing, even eager, to hear what the parents have to say. You should consider all opinions before making decisions. Our children need to learn the skills in life that will make them successful, contributing members of society, whether they are college-bound, trade school-bound, military-bound, or anything else they choose to do. That means math, English, history, science, finance, the bedrock of education that leads to success. Please stop this social engineering and woke culture idiocy. This is America. We need to start acting like it. The American spirit isn't, or wasn't, about handouts. If you want a handout, you'll get a pittance and then beg the government for more. If you work for your success, you'll achieve more than you ever dreamed of, and you'll have the self-respect that comes from work. Hard work, calculated risks, and faith. That is the American dream. I implore you to teach that to our children. At the last school board meeting, I said I would pull my son from school at WJCC, had mask mandates, taught lessons that divide our kids by race or any other superficial ways, and fall for the other insanities that seem to be gripping our nation. Well, I'm a woman of my word, and my son is officially out of WJCC, and I take no pride in that. But he is learning in a much more positive and stable environment. But it's sad, really, and I still care about the families who may not have the option to choose a different path for their children, which is why I'm speaking again tonight, even though I don't have a child in WJCC anymore. I enjoyed my public education as a child. My son was looking forward to a great high school experience, but even he said he didn't want to go back if it meant masking, teachers yelling at the students again like last year not to talk or walk together in the hallways, separated at lunch with one kid in each corner of the table, encouraged not to talk to each other while they're eating. I will not teach my son to live in fear and emotion. I will teach my son to live in faith and facts. Teach kids to be victims, and that's exactly what they will grow up to be, and what a tragedy that will be for America. I'm raising my kids to be brave, kind, hardworking, and compassionate to those in need. Since it's 3 minutes instead of 2, I practice a 2-minute speech. I also want to show you one of my son's friends, who's still in the public schools, sent him a picture of a first day get to know me thing, the type of thing that would be given in preschool, kindergarten, first grade. These are sophomores in high school. My favorite color, my hobbies and interests, and the best part, my pronouns. Stop this woke idiocy. I think that's my time. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Miss Anne Marie Smith.
Hey, good evening. Again, I've got 3 points to bring up. First is, I want to assure you that I listen to the school board meetings in their entirety to the end, whether I'm in full attendance or not. Most of us that come to speak have children, and usually at this time of day, we're providing input on their homework, feeding them dinner, and putting them to bed. We care enough about their education to come here to speak in person, and we balance this with listening at home for the remainder. Please don't interpret a lack of physical presence for absence. Point 2, I ask that the board submit a written definition of CRT, critical race theory, that it be read at the next school board meeting and posted permanently on the website. Superintendent Herron stated CRT is not taught in our schools, and this definition will provide a means to hold this statement true. Third, I ask that the board walk the talk, that each of you mask up in solidarity with your policy during all school hours and for the 2 hours of time students are in extracurricular activities after, essentially from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., whether you're in school grounds or not. Wear your mask at home, at work, at the gym, while outside. Follow the policy you enacted as if you were the ones it was enacted upon. Stand in solidarity with the students and faculty. Walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Mr. Toby Wiseman. Toby Wiseman. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, school board members and chair. We have not received a definitive answer as to the board's position on critical race theory being taught in the schools, of which a basic premise is that it is pervasive and permanent, but hidden beneath microaggressions of the rule of law, colorblindness, and objectivity. This book, titled Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, is currently being trained to public school teachers by someone being paid $100,000. Have each of you read this book? I hope that answer is yes, because then you know that on page 28, the author discusses implicit racial bias and structural racialization as bookends to systemic racism, which apparently doesn't require overt racism or racist actors to maintain it. Page 54 instructs unpacking our implicit bias, which starts with the human's lizard brain, which is ruled by the amygdala, that is designed to keep us safe in our implicit biases if we venture out of our comfort zone by talking about racism or any ism. Our lizard brain will tell us that skin color doesn't matter, or that we are all part of the human race. Notice the book's association made with the reptilian brain. It doesn't think, it only reacts. This pseudo-neuroscience assumes the connection that those who choose to respect colorblindness, objectivity, finding a common ground, are not accessing their brain's higher functionings. What does my skin color tell you? Nothing. What does my character tell you about me? A lot, whether good or bad. Are we spending $100,000 and at least equal training time on ensuring that teachers are competent in their subject area so students are proficient in what they're learning, especially after 1.5 years of disrupted education? Last year's elementary students' math SOL results had a 63% passage rate compared to 85% historical average. For high school students, it was 66% versus 83%. Parents need reassurance that teachers are prepared to catch their students up academically, not teach them about racism that might or might not be there, because now there is involuntary bias, and because of their skin color, one might be oppressed and one might be the oppressor. Can you tell me that you repudiate the CRT indoctrination and instead properly prioritize educating our children in ways that will actually advance their ability to think critically, achieve academic competence, and contribute responsibly and proudly to their society? You have the power to take an unpopular political stand and reject this divisive and dangerous philosophy, but that will be profoundly positive for our youth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Carolyn Petrina.
Evening, I'm Carolyn Petrina, James City County. First thing I wanted to address was a reattack on equity issues. One of the main things was I didn't know if you all were going to put it on your agenda, but considering school uniforms. I know in the past they're very successful. I know private schools use them all the time, but if you're serious about equity, I really think that needs to be a consideration. The other thing is, I know you all have said there's no CRT in our school systems, and I'm not as eloquent as the previous speaker, but if there isn't any, do you all have any measures or testing or monitoring in place that you can ensure that that's not happening in any form? So that would be a comfort to parents. The other thing is academics. Something I keep hearing is that Virginia is now 50th in ranking in academics and education. And I don't know where that comes from. I'm really searching hard for it, but I see on the WJCC site 2018 to 2019 numbers. When will we post current numbers so that as parents, we know the value of the education that we're paying for? Where does Virginia stand? Where do we stand locally? And what are we going to do to bring up those academic scores? I'm a huge proponent for VOTEC. I mean, I grew up in that era where, you know, every high school had a VOTEC. I think we need to consider those people who are not going to graduate and go to college, but they need to be electricians and plumbers, and there's a huge need out there. So maybe that's an alternative way to keep students engaged. As a teacher myself, I know how difficult it is for those people at a certain point, that maybe some other avenue would be a great avenue or career for them. So that would be a question I would have, is when do we expect the current numbers, how our students are, and that would be all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chris Skwoski.
Good evening, board. I don't want to be here. I'm tired of hearing about CRT. I don't want to talk about it. But at a recent board meeting, one of the board members asked Dr. Herron if CRT was being taught in WJCC schools, and she replied that it was not. While this answer was technically true, since the academic philosophy of CRT, which is studied in universities and graduate schools, is not being taught in WJCC, the practical application of CRT is certainly being implemented and can be readily seen by reading through Virginia's Roadmap to Equity, which is part of Navigating Ed Equity VA, as found on the VDOE website. This roadmap is being implemented in WJCC schools through Goal 2 of the strategic plan, and WJCC recently put out a job announcement for an equity coordinator whose primary job responsibility is to oversee Goal 2 of the strategic plan. Furthermore, looking at the acknowledgments in the Virginia Roadmap to Equity, several prominent members of the CRT movement are thanked for their contributions to the development of the Ed Equity VA framework, including Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, author of the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, which includes such quotes as, "The defining question is whether the discrimination is creating equity or inequity. If discrimination is creating equity, then it is anti-racist. If discrimination is creating inequity, then it is racist." I wanted to read excerpts from the roadmap to highlight just how correlated it is to modern CRT philosophy, but there were so many passages to choose from that I decided to just encourage parents, the board, and Dr. Herron to read it for themselves, since they proclaim to be unaware of how CRT is influencing the educational framework of the VDOE. However, to summarize the overall message of the roadmap, it is clearly the idea of achieving equal outcomes for all students. While I'm sure that we all agree that having equal access to a quality education is something that should apply to all children in Virginia, the idea that it is the school's responsibility and mission to ensure equal outcomes denies the reality that children vary widely in their talent, abilities, and interests regardless of race or gender. So what does CRT have to do with VDOE's goal of equity? Well, the overarching premise of CRT is that any inequity in a system can be attributed to racism. So logically, any disparate outcomes between groups is due only to racism in one or more forms, and the only solution is to eliminate that hidden racism. This is the line of thinking that results in elementary school children being asked to list all the ways they are privileged or oppressed, or high schools to do away with advanced placement courses because there were not enough non-white children enrolling in the classes. It is also the type of thinking that teaches kids that they are defined by the color of their skin and that they are either need to apologize for or be propped up because of something that they did not choose and cannot change. I realize I am not going to change anyone's mind during a 2-minute citizen's comment tonight, but I strongly encourage all parents to read through the Ed Equity VA materials on the VDOE website so that they can be aware of what is being pushed through the schools. Finally, in response to some comments by several board members after a previous meeting, I want you to know that just because parents cannot physically sit through an entire board meeting does not mean that we aren't watching the rest of the meetings online. Don't have this written down, but I do want to thank the board for doing away with some of the, I'm not going to talk about masks, but I am thankful that you've done away with some of the other clearly unnecessary things like plexiglass and some of the other unnecessary things that were being done, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Steven Zabinski.
My name, for the record, is Steven Zabinski. First, a quick word about the mask. Don't let American pop culture fool you. This is not the mask of a terrorist. It is the opposite. For those of you who don't know, this is a Guy Fawkes mask. Guy Fawkes Day is a holiday in England. Guy Fawkes Day celebrates the execution of Guy Fawkes, not his achievements. Some of the ways Guy Fawkes Day is celebrated is, one, by wearing the Guy Fawkes mask, and two, by burning Guy Fawkes in effigy. It's not to celebrate what a wonderful man he was, it's to celebrate that his plot was foiled and the English government survived. Greetings, parents and concerned citizens. It's become clear that not only is this board ignoring our concerns, they'd rather we not even be able to address them effectively. So I'm speaking directly to you. Because if you're concerned enough to be watching a school board meeting, we need you to get involved. Yes, we need you. If you're interested in joining us, please get in touch with me via email at zadd75@yahoo.com. That's ZADD75@yahoo.com. Zulu Alpha Delta Delta 75@yahoo.com. There are 7 members on this board, 2 of which are appointed by Williamsburg City Council. Williamsburg City has approximately 10% of the students in James City County, yet they have nearly 30% of the representation on this board. It's even more disgraceful as they're not even elected officials answerable directly to we the people. They are political appointees who can do as they please so long as the City Council approved. That's a clear example of taxation without representation if I ever saw one. We let it come to this. We need to recognize that. We also need to recognize that it's past time that we put a stop to it, and for that, you need to get involved. We need to show them that in America, elected officials are answerable to the people, not the other way around. They don't want to believe, so we need to demonstrate. Board. Cheering for a speaker who says something you agree with isn't disruptive, it's positive and encouraging. What's disruptive is shouting down a speaker you disagree with. Disruptive is robbing your fellow citizens of their right to speak their minds and address their grievances with their government in a manner consistent with the Constitution. What's disruptive, not to mention rude, is a member of this board interrupting his fellow citizens the second their allotted time is up, as is his habit. It is our right to speak here in this forum. It is your job to listen to us, whether you agree or not. If you're not willing to do that, you need to resign or be told you're fired. Thank you for your time.
Phyllis Eastman.
Phyllis Eastman.
Phyllis Eastman, sorry.
Up to the.
Good evening. Say no to critical RACE race theory. WJCC school system. Say no to CRT training of teachers under other names so it's not apparent that it's being taught to the teachers who've also been taught it in college and university. Say no to teacher credentialing based on their demonstration of CRT instruction in the classroom. Say yes to programs on excellence for all students based on their best level. Say yes to merit recognition. Encourage students to do their very best, work hard, to achieve, to be proud of working hard and being successful. Say yes to programs to help white males who are underachieving from working class families. They are being left out. They are not succeeding. I would like the board to have the inclusion administrator look into the statistics on white males from working class families and how well are they doing in school. Say yes to the basics that all people need in order to be successful, like you got when you went to school. Math, science, reading, critical thinking, and civics. Say no to race-based, false-premised programs such as 1619. It is not true. Say yes, 1776 teachings and civic education. Say yes, trade skills in vocational courses in every school. Kids need to be able to have a trade when they come out of high school if they are not college bound. And not all students are college bound. They need a skill. Help them find it. They can always go to school later if they choose, and they can always get a different skill. Say no to indoctrination that has occurred in leftist ideology.
Thank you, Ms. Eastman. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mike Hosang.
The last name?
Hosang. Mr. Hassan Lamont. Ms. Sarah Ortega. Ortega.
Hello. I would like to ask you to expand the time for public comments and allow those wishing to speak to you the full 3 minutes they should be allotted, even if there are more than 10 speakers. I think it is extremely important for parents and citizens to feel heard by those in government who are elected or even appointed, as the case may be, to represent them. The school board is a form of representative government. As you know, you work for and answer to the citizens who have elected you. It is important to keep this at the forefront of your mind when listening to comments, and especially when entertaining the idea of curtailing public comment, or, has been mentioned, taking it away altogether. You don't have to like the speakers, you don't have to agree with their opinions, you don't have to share their sentiments, but you do have to hear them and allow them to express themselves publicly. It is not offensive for a citizen to express emotion or frustration or even displeasure to a government body. It is a right. Regardless of the specific topic at hand, it is important for you to know the feelings, frustrations, and fears that people in your community are experiencing. This is critical to effective governing. I would also like to advocate for some form of public two-way communication between the school board, their experts, presenters, and the community. Citizens need a way to ask questions and receive answers. One suggestion is periodic town hall meetings, either with the board as a whole or with each member in his or her own district, and perhaps a panel of experts at critical junctures, such as changing COVID mitigations. This would be in the best interest of the community and the school board, in my opinion, as it would allow for more transparency and help quell misinformation. Your agenda for this evening references Virginia Code paragraph 22.1-78, bylaws and regulations, which states that A school board may adopt bylaws and regulations not inconsistent with state statutes and regulations of the Board of Education for its own government, for the management of its official business, and for the supervision of schools. If your own self-selected rules are what is standing between you and your constituents, then the good news is you have the power to change them. Furthermore, I'd like to call attention to Virginia Code paragraph 22.1-86. Each school board is authorized to appoint a committee of not less than 3 and no more than 7 members for each public school in the school division. The committee's duty shall be to advise the members of the school board with reference to matters pertaining to the school and to cooperate with the school board in the care of school property and in the successful operation of the school. Do these local advisory committees exist for each WJCC school? If so, how do we find out about them? And if not, have they been considered? In closing, I would just like to respectfully remind the board and my fellow citizens alike that serving as an elected official is a privilege. A citizen expressing him or herself to a government body is a constitutional right. Thank you.
Mr. Ty Legeman.
Good evening, school board. My name is Ty Logman. I've spoken obviously a few times before. And listening to the comments, obviously there's a lot of frustration, and I imagine it's two-way. Based on the comments at the end of last meeting, clearly there seemed to be a disconnect between the board's ability to execute and public citizens' sense of being heard. And I just heard Sarah talk about some suggestions for two-way feedback, and I think it's something really to consider. It's a challenge for people, especially parents who don't normally come to this forum, to stand up here and present their emotions and their concerns and then walk away without any kind of feedback. And when we had the epidemiologist last meeting from William & Mary, was been a great opportunity for people to ask questions and maybe answer some of the concerns they have about masking and other things, you know, to kind of help put their sensibilities in place. But instead, it's a one-way kind of flow of information, and then that's it. And I think it's causing a lot of frustration. As I go door to door, and I'm not trying to do a campaign run, but I'm talking to literally hundreds of people, and I can tell you the politicization, the perspective of the politicization of race and gender in the classroom really is an emotional nerve. And you know, what makes something politicized is if it doesn't survive an administration change. And so I would caution that as we invest ourselves in a direction that seems to be at odds, at least in the Powhatan district, with the values and sense of what public schools should be about, are we doing the right thing? I mean, we know our SOL scores are down, but we know it's COVID. We know people are walking to other opportunity for education. That's feedback. And how long does this continue for? If we continue to serve only certain interests, we're going to lose more people. And that public education should be for all the children in our area, not just for the ones coming in. So I'll close with, I'd love to see us open the aperture of our offerings to students who are doing, for example, homeschool, right? If they want to take an art class or a music class or something, allow them to participate, give them a sense of the exposure to our system, and at the same time, listen to the parents and figure out what do we do well and leverage that, and why are they not with us otherwise, and maybe improve upon that so that we can compete with private school and homeschool and other divisions to give us the best education for our children. So I appreciate your time, and hang in there.
Ms. Heather Burke.
Hi, my name is Heather Burke. Thank you for your time tonight. I think you are working under two false premises: that masks work and masks can be mandated. Masks do not stop viruses. Only respirators can. Consult with an industrial hygienist instead of an epidemiologist who will explain that COVID is 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. It goes through and around masks. Asbestos is 50 times larger than COVID, and only a respirator can protect you from it. Indoors, viruses can be diluted and destroyed, but not masked away. Hopefully, your HVAC upgrades do just this. Masks cannot be legally mandated. Federal law states that masks are emergency use medical devices that require informed consent and right of refusal. Federal law voids the August Health Commissioner order. Masks also violate 2 Virginia codes. First, code prohibits restraints that restrict a student's breathing or harm the student. Second, the code defines child abuse as something that causes impairment of bodily or mental functions. Masks do both. Child abuse is a criminal offense. Please grasp the laws of particle physics and forced medical devices. Lawsuits have been filed against the federal transportation mask mandate and local mandates. Let's avoid lawsuits and focus on education. The right to refuse was upheld in federal court for the EUA anthrax vaccine. You only have the authority to recommend masks with informed consent and right to refuse. Tell parents and students this now. It is the only legal mask policy. I trust you all have the moral fortitude to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Ms. Kim Hundley.
Good evening. Kimberly Hundley, 108 Mattaponi Trail. Just wanted to tell you I had a blast last week welcoming the students back. I volunteered at Stonehouse Elementary School. Kids, I had to slow them down from running off the buses. They wanted to get to their classrooms. Got to help with the new teachers with fire drill procedures. I served lunches, 3 hours of lunches for 4 days, and ate lunch, and it was really good. So it was just good to see the first week again, and it was really hard because I know everybody was doing their thing to make everything work, and even when we had little glitches with transportation and stuff, all the teachers and staff, they just pulled together and, you know, made it work, and it just did my heart really good. And the only thing I'm really was concerned about is I got to help at the end, the kindergarten team with centers. So I'm not sure, I'll be glad when the 10-day enrollment hits, because the numbers, I don't know the other schools, but at Stonehouse, so you have to imagine that you have 6 teachers but 5 centers. And so the 6th teacher has to break her kids up into the other, to add to the other 5 teachers. So if they already have 23, and then you add those 4 in, and then we added in the special ed children. So there were 30 kids in the centers. So I was there for music. That was interesting, 30 kids. And Jim, Miss Heath, trying to test, you know, little gross motor tests with 30 kids was something. So I did bring, you know, I went into the Kim Hundley Care Acts funds, went to the dollar store, and I bought some little star stickers, and I would like each board member to take one, because I'm sure that you all are going to go into the classrooms. I know you're going to visit. I know you do. So Mr. Dowell, there's a new kindergarten teacher. If you could give her this one and introduce yourself. But look at the numbers. They're really high. And so also preschools, we need more preschools. I just did a stint at a preschool. Then I taught summer school. Having 13 kids, I know that's not ideal for us to ever have 13, but having smaller class sizes, I'm telling you, we won't have as much learning loss. You get 23 and trying to test out in the hall, and so I know this is work session for you all, but we need to work on class size, and we need to work on getting more preschools so that our kids could be more successful. So I'm going to leave these stickers here. I hope you all go in and see what's going on and talk to kids. The kids were happy, I'm telling you. They were so happy. We had a tornado drill, warning and drill on I think the 3rd day, and they rolled with it. The kids in the trailers had to come in. The center's teachers went to the classrooms because it was the power of we. We are WJCC, and when we need to pull together, we do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley.
That was it.
All right, thank you. It takes us to 6.01, review of RFP 2202-303, threat risk vulnerability assessment. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, Mr. Snipes is going to present this item. This is an item that was approved in an end-of-year spending plan a couple of years ago, and we weren't able to enact it because of COVID. Mr. Snipes, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, School Board Chair, School Board members, and Dr. Herron. Tonight's agenda item for your consideration supports Goal 4 of the strategic plan. It's the review of award of contract and request for proposal number 220-2303. WJCC Schools is soliciting bids for a school security assessment to be performed on the school division buildings and properties. A vulnerability assessment is an ongoing process through which school divisions and schools identify and evaluate potential risk in areas of weakness capable of adversely impacting a school or a school system. The security assessment provides decision makers with an audit of existing environmental conditions and future implications based on site design, access, and nature of business operations. It addresses the opportunity to identify security strengths and deficiencies while providing recommendations for improving these conditions through corrective security countermeasures. A request for proposal was issued on August 6, 2021, with the due date of September 16, 2021. Funding for this project was included in the FY 2019 year-end spending plan in the amount of $100,000. And as Dr. Herron said, we had proposed this earlier, but it was placed on hold because of the pandemic. The superintendent recommends that the board review the project information and be prepared to award the contract at the September 21st, 2021 school board meeting, or as we finish the proposals and review.
Questions from board members? Al?
I was happy to support this back in 2020 when I first got news of this, and I think I'm prayerful that we don't have many deficiencies, but I think that we need to do what we need to do to find out where they are, what they are, and adapt to them, respond to them. So I'm very much supportive of this.
Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of just any public that's listening, the results of this will be presented to the school board, but perhaps not in its entirety in a public session because of the sensitive nature. So could you just talk about that the work will be done, but maybe not all of it will be accessible to the public for very good reason?
I would defer to Dr. Herron on that one.
That's quite correct, Ms. Cook. As part of the RFP, part of it is to present to the board, but it will be in a closed session environment because of the sensitive nature of the information. We have a lot of things in place that help with security at schools. This is just taking it to another level and having an outside set of eyes assess that for us. And so the information that they provide will be confidential to the board and administration because we will then take action on that information.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members? I think this is we put this on hold because we had the pandemic and we didn't have kids in our buildings, and so that was, I think, the right thing to do. I think it's always good to have somebody from the outside who isn't blinded by what they see every day to take a look and really assess this, and so I think this is a very important initiative, and I appreciate you bringing it before the board.
Thank you.
Chair, I do have
Dr. Beers.
Yeah, one thing, and when you mentioned the pandemic, this is what made me think about this. I didn't see the word health anywhere in this document at all, sometimes people equate health and safety together. Is that not going to be part of this at all? And we have another something else that deals with that?
I think, Dr. Beers, our focus for the last 17 months has been totally on health, the health piece of all of this, and we have lots of mitigation measures in place. This particular study will focus more on the physical environment and how we're reporting internally on things that could go wrong. So I think it'll complement what we're doing already, but our major focus already is there on health.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Anything else from board members? All right. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. I appreciate your time. 7.01 for WJCC Schools 2021-2022. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, Mr. Kiva will make a short presentation just of some of the data with coming back to school. We thought it was important that the school board and the public were aware of where we are after 4 days in the building. Mr. Kiva.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening, board members. When we talked with you in early August, we indicated that there were 4 primary areas in our planning focus as we were coming into the 21-22 school year. Those planning areas were in-person learning, health, safety, and welfare of students and staff, focus on student achievement, and then relationship building and supports. We also shared with you the interim guidance that was available to us in late July from VDOE, and I wanted to call your attention again to the 5 different focus areas that are involved there. Evaluating the level of community disease transmission is the first factor. Another factor is understanding the community level of vaccination coverage. And then the third factor mentioned there is considering the level of impact to a school. And this evening I want to dive into those 3 factor areas just to give you a glimpse of our first 4 or 5 days of school. You may remember this map from our meeting in early August. When we got together in early August, this map had some yellow and orange and red on it. We have added the blue circle around the Williamsburg-James City County area to indicate geographically where we sit relative to the Commonwealth. You will notice that this map is solid red. The entire state of Virginia is in the high community transmission rate area, and if you were to pull back and look at all 50 states on the CDC COVID data tracker, you would see a predominance of red. I would say, in the 90% across the entire United States in terms of level of community transmission. As an example, drilling into this data, over the last week or the reporting week for this particular piece of information, there have been 256 cases in James City County with a percent positivity at 11.56. That is a 25% increase in case rate and about a 3% increase in percent positivity. That's in James City County. On the Williamsburg side, there have been 33 cases reported for this reporting category, which is up by about 75% for the city of Williamsburg. And then percent positivity in the city of Williamsburg is at 22.86. And again, percent positivity is up in Williamsburg by about 7 percentage points. There is a high level currently of community transmission, and that is indicated by both the case numbers and also the percent positivity. That's what drives that data point. You may remember this graphic as well relative to Focus Area 2 that we shared with you back in August. We're bringing it back for you this evening. Wanted to let you know that VDOE and VDH have changed just a bit their reporting when it comes to vaccination for 12 to 17-year-olds. Previously, this graphic indicated less than 18. When we shared it with you in August, our percentage for 12 to 18 was somewhere in the realm of 22%. Of this community vaccinated for that age range. We are inching closer to 30%. Again, this could be students that attend school other than Williamsburg-James City County. It is our localities combined. Also sharing with you the number of students that fall into those age range as of that data on the far right-hand side is accurate as of this morning. That's Focus Area 2 in terms of vaccination coverage. Wanted to share with you the school level impact and looking at Focus Area 3 and the guidance from VDOE and VDH in terms of making decisions at the school level. And these numbers have gone up substantially since we began school. Just today, there were 12 cases reported. Some of those are tied back to testing last week. There were 2 cases reported over the weekend. So depending upon how you catalog the cases, it's 12 to 14 just reported today, dating all the way back to Saturday. We currently have 261 students that are being quarantined as a result of a close contact designation. We have 4 staff members in quarantine. And I want to also share with you that there has been an impact relative to our athletic programming. You may or may not be aware, but middle part of August, one of our varsity football programs was impacted with some close contact designation. That same program had a junior varsity impact here recently. At another high school, we've had some challenges with JV field hockey and also JV volleyball. And then today, we were alerted to football impact at another high school based on who they played on Friday. That we found out from another school division that one of the opponents tested positive, and as a result, there are going to be some close contact designations for the students that were competing on Friday evening in that. I share that with you to let you know that there's a high level of transmission going on within the community, and a number of our students are being impacted relative to quarantining status. At the same time, some of our students who have been designated as close contacts, and that number shifts quite a bit, some of our students have been designated close contacts but are not forced to quarantine as a result of their vaccination status. Those folks that are fully vaccinated are not required to quarantine as long as they remain asymptomatic. Additionally, on this page, I wanted to call your attention to the idea that as of today, we are able to verify and affirm that 83% of our staff is fully vaccinated. We've conducted a survey over the last 2.5, 3 weeks. We have confirmed with each person who submitted vaccine information that they've had both doses. We also can confirm that 7% of our workforce is not vaccinated. And if you're doing that math, you would say, well, wait a second, there's about 10% outstanding. Yes, that is correct. We're still trying to get information from 10% of our workforce to go ahead and finalize what our percentage is overall. But as of right now, we're sitting at 83% fully vaccinated. Those pieces impact our school level impact. And finally, I just wanted to call your attention to this idea that we continue to want to talk about vaccination rates, especially for our students, because those students who are deemed close contacts but are fully vaccinated are not necessarily needing to quarantine as long as they remain asymptomatic. The close contact pieces have been challenging in the last 4 or 5 days. We've been very fortunate to have brought on 2 additional contact assessors. We're utilizing some grant CARES money to be able to do that. They were on staff and ready to go last week as we got into the school year. And we're going to continue to need that kind of support moving forward with the community transmission rate as high as it currently is. And finally, before we do some questions and answers, there's one particular item on this prevention measure that I did want to point out beyond the idea of promoting vaccination. It's the idea that when you as a parent or family member have an inclination that your son or daughter may not be well or is exhibiting symptoms, we would ask for you to keep them home. We've learned through the last 3 or 4 days that there have been a number of students that have come to school experiencing symptoms and have ultimately then tested positive, and as a result, there have been close contact designations and other students being in a quarantine status as a result of that decision making. So we would implore folks, if you're not feeling well or exhibiting symptoms, to please stay home. With that, I know that there may be some questions and be glad to try to answer them.
Ms. Owenby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions, Mr. Keever. With regard to the 83% of our staff that we currently know are vaccinated, do we know of the 83% how many are teachers versus other personnel in buildings?
I'm not prepared to break that out for you this evening, but we do have that information. We have it broken down really by school and department, and we can drill into that to make some specific determinations. We want to be able to finalize that 10% that we've not heard from, and once we have that information, I think we'll feel particularly comfortable sharing where we are in totality as a school division.
Thank you. And then my last question is about transportation and speaks to one of our speakers tonight. So our third-party vendor, I know many of us have received some emails and texts and phone calls. If you could just give us an update on where we stand with our third-party vendors that we hired to help mitigate our busing shortage issues and how that's impacting our students with special needs.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to try to give some overarching comments and be happy to answer additional questions as they come forward. In the early part of August, we identified approximately 115 students that may be eligible for transportation with ALC. Over the course of 2 or 3 weeks in early August, that number went from 115 down below 79 or 80. When we identified the 115, we did communicate directly with each of those families by letter and then followed up with phone calls for the 79 that we identified as needing that transportation. Frankly, there was a gap between what we shared with families and what ALC did as a result of that. We were expecting, and have mentioned this to ALC, that they follow right behind with our letter and personal phone call to each family with a follow-up phone call that next week. That did not occur on the timeline that we had established. So that's frustrating, and I think that created a level of concern for some of the parents involved. As of today, there are 56 students that are being transported by ALC. Those 56 students look to be representative across the entire division. It looks like we have students in just about every school that are having that type of transportation. There have been 8 families that have indicated that they wish to not participate with ALC. There are another 3 that are what we're calling the pending category. That means that they've expressed some concern, and we're trying to work with them to address those concerns. What I would want to point out is that in every single instance of a concern being brought to the transportation team or the school team or ALC, we have worked collaboratively with the family to try to address that concern. And that's why I'm comfortable telling you that the 8 that have indicated they do not wish to utilize ALC transportation, we have worked to be able to provide them with a different mode of getting to and from school. Does that get close to some of the information that you were looking for, Ms. Ownby?
It does. If I could just a couple follow-ups
Sure.
to that, based on the information that you gave us at our last meeting with regard to ALC and information that we received from families. So have the labeling on these vehicles, has that been shored up? Are they consistently labeled with the same logos, and are the staff wearing, is it clear who these people are that are transporting our students?
We believe that it is. We believe in fact, I was involved in a call, a Zoom call with the ALC leadership to include Mr. Snipes, Mr. Lambusta, and our transportation folks. There should be a sign in each of the vehicles that says contracted transportation or student transportation. One of the pieces of the puzzle is that it is not, quote unquote, an ALC car. The car belongs to the person that they have contracted with in order to help provide this service. And so we have asked for that sign to be in each one of our vehicles. There are spot checks that ALC does conduct, and our staff is looking as well to ensure that those signs are in cars.
And I'm almost done, Mr. Kelly. Thank you. So at our last meeting, many of us talked about safety, and I thought I heard that there would be a WJCC aid in every one of those vehicles. Is that correct?
The aid piece is generally related to whether or not there is an aid that is mandated as required as a part of the IEP process. In fact, in each of the conversations that we had with parents during the initial communication piece, we talked about what it is that would be provided in the vehicle. You know, is an aid required from your perspective? Is the aid required relative to special education, et cetera? So I can't say that in every particular car there is an aid for each student.
So that's what I heard, and so I know my comfort level went up when I thought, okay, one of our own staff will be in the vehicles. My comfort level is slightly decreased now, knowing that many of the students who we're providing the service to are nonverbal. So I'm not as comfortable with third-party people with none of our staff in the car. That's just saying. And then just lastly, again, speaking to our one speaker tonight, I know that tradition in WJCC schools are to have special kind of opportunities and activities for our seniors. And I would hope that maybe there's a way we could think outside of the box and honor all of our seniors, and so some of our seniors with special needs might not do the typical kind of senior things that seniors do, and of course, we're living in a COVID world, but I know in this case tonight, don't want to go into the weeds, but I would hope that we could do something for a student who is his very last year in our school division.
Yes, ma'am. I want to be really clear that we certainly will follow up with any concern that is brought forward, whether it be in this setting or a concern that comes to us by email or phone. I know that the transportation team and Mr. Snipes will work diligently to ensure that our students are looked after. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Beers.
The question's been answered. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Young.
Yes, I just have a question about when we contracted with ALC, was it made clear that these students were special needs students?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point, did they understand that because a student is special needs, that they may have special needs? And I mean, it concerned me when I was listening to the mother tonight. I do think you'll follow up on that. Am I correct on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but maybe they need to understand that.
Just for clarity, when you say they, are you referring to ALC?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. They are aware of the students that they are transporting on our behalf. Yes, ma'am.
I guess my concern is how many of them have been trained in any kind of training with working with special needs students. I mean, that might be something, if they're going to provide a contracted service, that they might need to provide some training for. I am in the weeds, I apologize, but I am concerned. Thank you.
Dr. Beers.
Yeah, the only other thing I'm curious about, because I know we have a lot of working parents, and do you have an issue where you pick up a child in one location, but that child has to be dropped off at another location because that's where the child care is? In other words, they get picked up at their home, but the parent is working all day long, and so they need to get to child care. Is it deal with that? Does that come up at all?
Yeah, at the present time, we are dealing with that. Some parents are requesting that their student be dropped off at a different location. However, because of COVID and the trying to not have kids on different buses to contact trace, we are not allowing that at this time.
I think I know of a couple of parents where that it's a challenge because of where they work and where their child care is after school.
Traditionally, in non-COVID years, we would provide that transportation for that parent, but because of the current COVID conditions as well as efficiencies, we are unable to do so.
I think if I might add, just briefly, we estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of being approximately 27 runs short in terms of being able to provide full coverage across Williamsburg, James City County. And the idea that we're utilizing the ALC transportation piece has probably given us back about 7 runs. So if you take those 7 runs and add it to the 27, you're looking at about 34 runs that potentially are uncovered. Now, the transportation team has worked diligently to double up drivers, have them come back and do additional runs to try to get everybody where they need to go and do that in a time frame that keeps it as close to the beginning and ending of the school day as possible. I think we would all wish for more on-time arrivals, and I think it's something that we'll continue to work on and try to navigate as we get additional data from the first 4, 6, 8, 10 days of school to know where some of our real gaps are.
Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to echo my colleagues' concerns about transportation, and I do hope that we're looking at that issue, not only in the immediate but long-term, and included in that is making the job of a bus driver more financially attractive and lucrative, because I think we just underpay those really critically important members of our team. I know it's too early to talk about it, but I just want to keep it in front of us and keep our eye on the prize of just really getting an assessment of how we intend to, monitor academic progress, particularly with how quickly we think we can regain some of those losses. I want to make sure that we're keeping on top of that. And I know it's too soon, but I hope in the not too distant future we can hear about that. And then I'd also like to ask, I know again it's early, and you're probably going to say I don't want to answer this right now, but I think it has to do with social distancing and class size and keeping kids separate. How are we doing on enrollment? Are more or less kids, did more kids show up than we expected?
We have currently got 306 students more. This is last week's enrollment. I haven't got today's yet. More than we budgeted for. We do have, there's some schools are getting more enrollment than others. It's still changing daily. Stonehouse is one of those schools that has a higher enrollment increase than others. So we're monitoring class size and enrollment daily to keep the class size levels that we said we would stick to this year because of social physical distancing. And currently in the process of adding more teachers as a result of that.
Oh, really? That's great. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And then thank you for the update on vaccine numbers, and I'll look forward to hearing when you can track down that extra 10%. How is the concept of boosters fitting into your calculus at this point? Have you gone there in your thinking?
No, ma'am. Certainly it's something that we've thought about, but our primary mission right now is to ensure that someone is either fully vaccinated or is not, and then the booster piece, I think, will be down the road after we've been able to determine the outstanding 10%.
Thank you. And then I'd like to comment on your statement about keeping kids at home when they're not well. And this pandemic has changed our viewpoint on what is okay, what kind of symptoms are okay to send to schools. And I support that. I think it makes perfect sense from a public health perspective. But when a parent is faced with a child who has a common cold, which would keep that child at home, sometimes a common cold lasts a week. And so I remain concerned, bless you, Mrs. Young.
Bless that common cold.
I remain concerned about kids being asked to stay home out of an abundance of caution so that we don't spread a virus that we know we can't spread, but then they're not being able to access the academic content of their classes. And so I just think that that's something that parents are going to struggle with. And you can have a kid who has a common cold, get them tested for COVID, it comes out negative, and it turns out 3 days later it actually was COVID because of the way that the virus works. And so I just want to say yet again, particularly in high school and middle school, if there's a way for kids to be able to dial in and, just listen to what the teacher's saying during the class, I think that's critically important, because otherwise we're incentivizing parents to send their kids to cross their fingers, close their eyes, and send the kids in anyway, because it's just too much time to miss. And so I just want to...
If I may, Ms. Cook, I think that if there's a question in the parent's mind, is it, should they stay home, should they not stay home? I think reaching out to the school and talking with the nurse, how are things going in a particular building relative to illness? Same with the primary care physician if you're able to reach that person, but just to ask for an additional opinion as time allows. I understand what you're saying about incentivizing to stay home or not stay home, and that's certainly something that we've looked at and talked about as a group in terms of how do we best support those students. But what has become clear, at least in 4 or 5 of the cases that we have traced today and going back to last week, is that it feels like parents had a sense that student A or student B was not well and sent them to school anyway. And that's what we're hoping to try to avoid.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand, but it's hard to ferret out whether it's just a common cold or... Anyway, and then also, I just want to say that I think, particularly when you're talking about the athletic programs you mentioned today, I think, so for me, in-person school is critical. I think that's, I just don't think we can stop doing that. I think we have to, that has to be our absolute top priority. And as such, you know, I absolutely support masks adamantly. And then I also think we really need to take a serious look at either weekly testing or mandatory vaccination, particularly with VHL-sanctioned activities. Other school divisions have taken that action, both for staff and for athletes or VHSL-sanctioned participants. And, you know, I just think the public needs to hear that, you know, around the state there are health departments who have recommended schools shut down. There's been a couple so far this school year, and there's hundreds of cases in the schools. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And if in-person learning is our priority, I think we need to be, you know, serious about that. And, you know, I'm a little frustrated when I hear people talk about being driven by fear. I just want to say that I don't know a member of this school division or a member of the leadership of the school division there who's fearful. Everyone is beyond courageous and has done everything that they can to make sure that students are learning and can come back to school this year. So I think these people here are driven by common sense, not fear, and I'm grateful for that. So,
Ms. Owenby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Conversation made me think of a couple additional points. Again, going back to one of our speakers tonight, Mr. Keever, one of the speakers wanted to know when we were going to have current academic data, that we only had information from 2018, 2019. I just want to make the listening public understand that we do know exactly where our students are in terms of learning loss. And it might not be on the website, but we have a handle on that. If you could just speak to that so that the listening public understands we know where we need to go.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that the presentation at our last board meeting laid out some of our academic thoughts, and even went to the extent of saying, here are SOL results, but let's remember we can't utilize SOL results from last spring as a comparison point for any other testing scenarios based on some of the ramifications of the testing windows and how those work. So I feel confident, and I know Dr. Herron, we talk about it on a weekly basis in SLT, how our students are performing and what the focus area really needs to be.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the fact that our staff do have a handle on that, and we have an academic plan. I just don't want anyone out there thinking that we don't know where we need to go. And then just wanted to highlight again the fact that we do have an additional 300 plus students that weren't budgeted for, and so we'd had speakers tonight come and speak to the fact that students aren't coming back. And I know we heard even just in the past year that we were going to be down numbers in Stonehouse, and in fact it's our Stonehouse numbers that are burgeoning. So I think that is a testament to how well this division is addressing the pandemic, and I think the broader community and our families know that we are a premier school division, and we work very hard to keep our students and our staff safe. And so I think that's a testament to what families who actually have children in our buildings know and believe. And then just a last kind of an ancillary note here, and maybe this is not necessary information to have, and maybe you don't know it, but I just know as a parent who was driving my own kid to school this year, just because it's sometimes easier than waiting for the bus. How many parents how many more parents are driving their children to school this year? Because I know I've driven past schools, and so the backup along the road in front of the schools is longer than it typically is, and so I'm just curious.
Ms. Obe, I don't think we've got an exact number, but we are very aware that the lines, parent car lines to school, are very long in a lot of schools, and that's actually inhibiting the buses getting to the schools to deliver students on time. And while we appreciate that parents are doing that and understand why, that is contributing to the rate of the buses arriving and leaving the school on time. Do want to mention something about this year. For the first time, VDOE are introducing growth assessments, and those will be given end of September, early October, and that will be a snapshot in time of where our students are. So we will have that information coming fairly soon, and students will be taking those assessments from 3 through 8th grade. Also, we do intend to still this year give the MAP assessment, which will give us a sense of where our students are. So the SOLs weren't a good read because of COVID, because of absentee rates and those choosing not to do the test, but I do think we'll have some very useful information within the next 6 weeks to really direct our instruction in every classroom.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Heron. And then just to point out again, we don't have car loops in our division. We do have bus loops. And so that does make it difficult for parents who are driving. I make my kid go to school extra early so that we're not backing up on Long Hill Road.
Thank you, Ms. Omby.
Ms. Young?
And I pick him up late. He has to wait.
Ms. Young?
Okay. Dr. Heron, when you're talking about growth assessments, that's academic growth assessments that you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am. There's new state assessments which will give an indication of academic progress earlier, and they are driven by the state. They're a much shorter assessment than the SOL, and this will be the first time that they'll be administered as actually this fall.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted a clarification. I guess I don't know who to direct this question to. Contact cleaning. Are we still doing the same type of contact cleaning we were doing last fall? Or has it been lessened to some extent? Because since what I'm hearing from Dr. Dolan is that the virus isn't living on contacts, but, I mean, on surfaces, but I just want to know, are we?
Custodian's motto is always to clean for health. So they're always cleaning touch points and surfaces and making sure that things are clean. They're still using our electrostatic sprayers as well. So nothing has changed in regards to the cleaning process.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clear. And then for the symptoms of COVID, do our parents have access? I mean, I'm sure they can look, but have we given them the symptoms of COVID so that, like, if they have a student that is ill, that they can make some? I know we have the health check.
Yes, ma'am. I would point our parents back to the symptom checker, as we've called it, and it's available in just about every family newsletter that we put out, and it is on our website as well. And we try to refer back to that often in conversation.
Right, and I think that's. I mean, sometimes we're just
not
aware.
I believe it was sent to every family before the beginning of school.
Yes, and so please take a look at that. And then I had a question about our children who have received doctor's letters of exemption for masking allowed to not wear a mask at school? If you have a child, I mean, do you understand my question?
I think so, and I think that I would say that on a case-by-case basis, let me back up. Our expectation and our process has been that students and staff in the building wear a mask. You are, based on the health order, able to request an accommodation, and the school works with the family and student to determine what a reasonable accommodation may be. And there are some specific things and some specific ways that we would work with individual students and families to address the need for an accommodation.
Okay.
So there is not an automatic, I guess is what I'm saying, that it does require some level of conversation, and we as a school division are obligated to talk about and provide a reasonable accommodation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the 261 students that are currently quarantined, can you help me recall, can you remind me what the messaging is to those families as to when they should get tested, what that timeline looks like so that they can return to the classroom? And is it the same for each student?
It is not.
It is not.
It is not the same for each student. And as an example, there is a classroom in our division today that has been determined to need to be out for a full 14 days as a result of some close contact. So that's a message that goes directly to that family in terms of what it is that their quarantining status would be. And it's each case, each time, specific communication to the family or families, and then a broader school-based communication relative to there has been a positive case within the building. If you were a close contact, you would have received direct information from the school, from the what have you.
And if I could add to that, the incident today was on the guidance of the health department.
Can you help me understand, because I'm interested, what's the range between days that we're advising a family to get their student tested? Is it a 5-day to 14-day? What is the range, and why is there a difference?
I'd probably want to get you some specific language from VDH around how those
I'd appreciate
how
that.
those
Yeah.
scenarios are
Sure.
handled. I think that at the end of last school year, we were able to feel comfortable backing off of the 14-day piece down to the 10-day piece. And then there's a testing component, I think, after day 5, but no fewer than 7. But I can get you some specific information, Mr. Dow.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. And one other question, maybe not so much of a question. It's been a question for the last year and a half, but I've never raised it, being one of those parents that sits in the pickup loop, the drop-off loop. My wife more than me, admittedly. It just seems to me if vehicles, more parents, families picking up and dropping off their student is inhibiting access of school buses. I look at this process and I'm not sure why we're not just letting the students loose at the end of the day. They're masked. They understand that they need to be 3 foot spaced as they enter the building. Why can't they, and this is my question, why can't they enter the building freely? Why can't they leave the building freely, especially? Can you help me understand that?
From my perspective, we want a full accounting of folks as they get out of a vehicle or get off a bus and move into the school building. And I think that there's a particular rhyme and reason for why we create those structures, especially at the elementary level. I think that's important in terms of just, we want to make sure that Greg Dowell gets to room 201 with Miss Smith. And so we want to make sure that we know he's getting out of this car. We can let him out of the car and let him move on in. I also think there are some safety concerns and travel concerns if it's, you can walk anywhere you want, whenever you want, that we're not able to make sure that our parking lots are safe. There are some members of our community that aren't as interested in going as slowly as possible on school grounds or in school lots. And I would hate to have a situation where, because of just entrance and exit based on what you desire to do as a student, for you to mistakenly be struck by a vehicle. So I think a lot of it's related to safety and security and our sense of wanting to look after our students.
And I do appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that. That makes sense to me as I hear that from an elementary standpoint, where before, when I did have elementary students, I would walk them in and I would hand them over to a teacher inside the building, and now that's not the case, so that does make sense. I still do struggle with middle school and high school when I would just let them out of the vehicle, they go. Or I sit in the vehicle in the parking lot, they come to me uninhibited. And it does seem like it creates more problems. I see it that at Tueno and at Warhill in particular, you're only getting maybe 7 to 8 students in a vehicle at a time, and there's stoppage for the next 7 to 8 students. It's far less at Tueno, and you can see the lines backed up. So I would just ask if we can take a look at that. I see the safety issue from an elementary standpoint. That was never the case for middle school, high school prior to the pandemic. While at the same time, I hear your point on that parking lot, and I have had words with parents that are moving too quickly. I've had words with a particular teacher that was moving too quickly, so it does happen. But at the same time, I think we can get back there if we take a look at it. I would just ask that we take a look at it.
We'll certainly look at it. I think, there's lots of things involved this year. It's the number of students exiting at the same time and trying to keep that distance that we're trying to keep throughout the day as well. But certainly it's something we can talk with the principals about this week at a principals meeting.
Thank you.
And just get a sense of the rationale and how it works, because it may be very different by building as well.
Sure.
So we'll certainly gather some information.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I think that is, sorry, is that, okay, there we are, is that these aren't normal times. And the idea that there might be 5 or 6 high school kids in the same car dropping off, I think that's also their parents' responsibility in making that determination. Is this the safest way for my kids to get to school? It's really, for me, it's more, these are not normal times, and that means you may not be able to do every single thing that you want to do.
Dr. Beers, I'm not sure what you heard me say. I didn't say 5 or 6 people in a car.
No, that's just a number I picked out. It's more like, a group of kids, they carpool, and they have cars, and they pick each other up and they go. And all I'm saying is, I think parents, I hope parents are aware of that and take the appropriate kinds of precautions to that it doesn't create a health hazard for their kids. I think what's hard is they're not on school grounds, but then they are on school grounds, and then you deal with the parking lot and all that other kind of stuff. But I think the first place is how are kids who have their own cars, who's responsible for whom, and how that works out with those cars. I have grandkids who they're both seniors. They drive to school. They always pick up 2 or 3 of their friends. So I know it's an issue, and I think that it's important that parents take some of the responsibility for dealing with that.
I have to admit, when you said let the kids loose, I had a vision that was not very pleasant. But I don't think that's what you had in mind. But I was like, oh,
It might have been.
a stampede.
It might have been.
Dr. Beers, do you have anything else? Okay, Ms. Young.
Yes, I want to piggyback and go back to something that Ms. Cook said, because you said we now have a classroom, that the classroom is quarantined, the students are home is that correct? Is that what I understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what accommodations are going to be made for their learning during this period, this time that they're in quarantine?
We are going to work to ensure that they have access to the teacher via the Zoom platform, via an OWL, and it's going to be synchronous daily instruction is the goal.
Okay, so similar to what we were doing during the heavier part of the pandemic. Okay, yeah, because it seems to me, and I agree, if the whole class is out, it's time to set up the OWL.
I think one of the advantages of last year, and there maybe were a few, is that teachers know how to pivot when we face a situation like this where we do have to quarantine a full class. And hopefully this won't be something we'll have to do very often, but honestly the numbers are alarming from the first week. And so we're trying to put structures in place to keep students in school.
Very much, Doctor.
Ms. Hummel?
Been very okay. So the transportation contract, I had a question way back, and then we contracted for a certain amount, right? I remember voting on that contract for a certain number of people that we were transporting. That number has
Yes, ma'am.
obligated still for that larger number, or was it prorated?
No, ma'am, you awarded not to exceed.
Right. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to.
And so that number will change on a monthly basis depending on the number of students that we transport. And as we're able to get more resources and more bus drivers and reestablish routes, we will continue to diminish that number.
And then you said you're working with the 8 families, is that correct?
The 3 pending, I would say, that are the ones that we're continuing to work with. The 8 have told us, and we have provided a different transportation mode as a result of coming out, of saying that they wish not to be transported by ALC.
And the delta between what you originally thought and then 56 students that are now being transported minus the 8 families, what's happening to those other children? Are their families transporting them?
Some cases, families have made a determination to transport, and in other cases, we've tried to provide some level of transportation service. We've also looked to bring other students into the fold who we can transport via the ALC method. As an example, some of the students that are provided services through McKinney-Vento have subsequently been transported by ALC. So what we're trying to do is to keep a certain number of runs in the mix so that we can have that efficiency on the other side for the general transportation pieces.
So when I think my assumption when we all voted for this is that if the students did have an aid, if they were special need and they had a certain level of assistance, that wouldn't go away or it wouldn't be diminished by this contract. And I think that was my comfort level, I guess, in saying, yes, that sounds like a great idea, and I totally understand the challenge with the bus transportation. But I just am hopeful that that we aren't doing a disservice to our kids that are special needs, and that they are receiving less than they were receiving kind of experience. So that's kind of a comment about the masks. I would just like to say that I was really encouraged when Dr. Heron shared that there's really a very, very small percentage of families that are resisting this whole mask mandate, a very, very small amount of families. And so I think all of us have to kind of keep that in mind when we do hear speakers that they represent in the totality of our school system a very, very small minority of parents, and that the vast majority of the parents and the families are comfortable with the mandates that are in place and comfortable with the wearing masks in exchange for the fact that they can be in school as much as possible. Yes, I work for William & Mary, and we just got a new update tonight saying that masks are now required outside in addition to inside for everyone. So they've got another 100 cases of vaccinated students. Just trying to do everything we can at the university level, and finding that a lot of the breakthrough cases through contact tracing is not coming from the classroom, but from external activities. So if that is indeed what is going to happen at another, subset of our area, I can see we should just get comfortable with masks for a while and just get used to it and comfortable with it, because it's kind of what we're going to be dealing with in exchange for having a learning environment. And then, Mr. Dow, I just wanted to say one of my substitute positions many years ago was to work the front office at Berkeley Middle School. And so there were these like free-for-all parents that would literally drop their kids off at the funeral home across the street, and their kids would be crossing Ironbound Road to try to, then through all the car lane in order to get into the school. And it was just a madhouse and so dangerous. So I think I would assume, just from my one experience in that middle school, that chaos would reign supreme with
I can tell you that that's happening even more now. I'm telling you, I see it. It's happening even more now from Toano, from War Hill.
I just worry about
their parents are dropping their kids off at Harris Teeter to walk to War Hill to avoid the line. Yeah. I see it. They're parking at the fishing supply store across the street on 60 and letting them bike across, just because of the wait time through the line. So it's exponential now.
Anyway, that's just I don't know what the solution is, other than hopefully the bus transportation will get better and everything will even itself out like it usually does the first month of.
I think, could I just add a comment there about the buses? I think this is going to be, it is long-term. It has been coming. I guess the question I have, all right, what are the primary, oh, I know, I'm sorry, this is too short. What are the primary, okay.
All kinds of people moving. Got Chris back here moving again.
I lost my train. No, I'm just kidding. I know what I'm going to say. And we're going to start working on next year's budget. And what I'd like to know is what are the one or two reasons, maybe three, that we can find from either bus drivers who've left or bus drivers who are thinking about it, that they would be, if we could deal with those, that they would be less reluctant to become a bus driver. Is it money? Is it time? Is it benefits? Is it, what is that?
I think.
No?
Go ahead, Mr. Snipes.
I think across the nation, everyone is experiencing bus shortage. It's not always about the money, because it is about the time that they get to spend with their kid. They have separate time frames of the day. That could be a reason they're not doing it. But we're experiencing bus shortages all across the nation. So it's not I don't know if you can pinpoint about it being monetary.
So raising their salaries that's not gonna be, they won't do anything.
I can't not say that, but I can tell you that it's not the only factor that is you're not getting bus drivers.
I would suggest that one factor is that many bus drivers are retirees.
Right.
And it's a job that they can do for a small number of hours per day. When we think of what we've been living through for the last 17 months, older members of society are more susceptible and more vulnerable because of the pandemic, and I'm sure that fear factor has played into whether to continue to drive a bus, especially when students, for the most part, are not vaccinated.
Right.
So I think lots of things have played into. Money is always a factor, and we should always consider it for our lower paid employees and always be wanting to do something to increase the quality of life for all of our employees.
Right.
But I think there's a lot more to it, and I think it's the pandemic as well.
So really, it could be fear of getting the virus, and which once again points out the importance of everybody that comes in contact with a bus driver has been vaccinated. So that might help lower that anxiety. But it's no, because I know. It isn't going to, even if maybe if we can ever get beyond the pandemic, I think you're right. I think it's going to be, always is going to be an issue, isn't it? Just because of the nature of the job and and how we deal with it. But because we don't, there's not a position called a professional bus driver where you get to work 40 hours a week, and it's a regular job. So it's tough. I know that's.
And I think one of the things we do offer, which is fabulous for bus drivers, is those working for more than 6 hours have benefits, and it's a huge bonus and benefit that we provide. So if anybody's listening out there tonight and is looking for a job, it is a great part-time job that you can come and do for us.
Okay,
So jumping off from where Dr. Beers was there, and I think a couple of other board members too, about the transportation services. For me, that was important for us because we didn't have bus drivers to fill those positions. I don't want to look at it as a budget issue. if we get to the point where we have bus drivers and we can take that back in-house, I think we probably do it better than our contractors would do it. And so I don't want to look at that as being a money issue. That if we get to the point where we can transport them, I think that we should look towards bringing that back in-house if possible. I don't know if that's going to be possible this academic year, but I don't want to look at it as a dollar thing.
That is certainly our goal, Mr. Kelly, and also we're looking at potential white fleet vehicles that do not require a CDL license, that drivers, other than those, we may attract more drivers who don't need the special licensing to actually drive a smaller minibus. So we're looking at every possible way to do that. In fact, we've reached out to a company, I'll let Mr. Snipes tell the information on that, about small buses under 14 don't require a CDL, and we do have money in the budget for buses, and we're actually reaching out to see what the status is on those, if you want to share that, Mr. Snipes.
Did a fabulous job, Dr. Herron. He's explained it all.
Nice job. I think he just said, "Nice job, boss."
Yes.
Well, basically, there's only one available right now. Across, we've looked at the different companies, but we're starting to work at all of the pieces so that we can be more efficient and bring more staff on who don't need the same licensing.
I agree.
The other piece too, so close contact designations, particularly with some of our athletics, where the other team had some issues. How is that? I know you're going to provide Mr. Dell and all the rest of us some data on, or some information on how we determine that. But how do we determine that? If you line up across the ball with somebody for 4 quarters, it's just.
You're not too far off from it, Mr. Kelly, in terms of if you are an offensive lineman and playing against a defensive lineman who may have tested positive and you're both in for 3 or 4 quarters, that certainly is it's inside of the 3 to 6 feet, 15-minute piece. And part of that is in consultation with the health department, whether that be our health department or the health department from the school or county that we might have played. And it is not. It's not quite as simple as perhaps in college or professional, where they are actually tracking your movements on the field. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but in some of those professional athletic realms, they are tracking each individual athlete in your contact proximity to others to help determine whether or not you are in a quarantine status. We don't have that capability.
Yeah, that's right.
We're making the best decisions we can based on the information we have at the time.
Gotcha. It's just that would just be a big shame, but I guess it also would point to if those athletes were vaccinated, then
Correct.
We wouldn't have that situation. So,
and what we're finding as we talk to parents across the athletic realm is some are, many are not, and I think that we'll continue to see that as we go, which perhaps is part of the reason that other locales have looked specifically at vaccination requirements for student athletes.
So. We've also, as I understand it, there was also additional vaccinations required this year for some of our students beyond, with the meningitis that we were requiring.
That's correct. That's part of the new House bill that I sent the board the information last week. Ms. Bourgeois is here if you want more information.
I do not want to do that.
Okay, no problem. But yes, there is an additional requirement, and students will not be able to come to school unless they have it, because that's the law.
Right. So there are vaccinations out there that are required, and so I would just encourage parents to for the protection of their students, if they're eligible, to really consider getting their students vaccinated. So I appreciate that. The school enrollment numbers on week 1. Obviously we have a 10-day count, then we have a 30-day count at end of September 30 count. I'm almost a little bit terrified, because with 350 new students, more than what we had budgeted, that's several classrooms, more than 10 classrooms. Granted, they don't come in nice classroom bundles, but I have heard lots of that going on. I got a voicemail today, which I forwarded to the administration, where somebody wanted to know how they could enroll their middle school students, so it's still coming.
Yes,
And so and that more students creates more buses and more teachers and I do believe also, as was mentioned earlier, that it's a testament to where we are, and as a school division and as a community. So I think that's a good sign for us. Mr. Dow and I were at an event with Dr. McGlennon, and he mentioned that James City County was the eighth fastest growing county in the state. So I told him we would talk about that when we were talking about an elementary school, but that was another story. I think that's pretty much all I have. Any other board members have any? Ms. Owenby?
Just want to thank our staff for all of the work that they're doing with regard to COVID mitigation and then the contact tracing. So I just want the public to understand, not only are we educating our students like we always have, and we know the demographics are changing. I've said that for 5 years. And we know we do have COVID loss. But now, I mean, Mr. Keever, you were hired to do certain things, and now we've thrown all this additional work on you and all of our nurses and our teachers and our staff. And so just keeping our students safe and understanding who needs to be quarantined and when is a whole nother level of coordination on top of an already stressed system. So I just want to thank you and just want to put that out there to everyone who is listening. Our staff are working really hard and they're really tired, and it's 4 days in, and it's unpredictable. So, but thank you for all that you and everyone in this division are doing to keep our kids in school, which is not easy. Thank you.
Yeah, because all that other stuff, I'm sure we haven't taken off of Mr. Keever either. So I mean, there's just a lot going on, and there's a lot of we transport 11,000 kids to school, some way, either on the bus or whatever. But it's 11,000 one-offs. You can't say, we did pretty good today. We got 10,990 to school, because you got those 10 kids. And so it's certainly a challenge. And having gone to operations, it's always one of my first stops on the first day of school, because it is crazy there, and I'd rather be there earlier in the day than later in the day. It's just gets kind of nuts, I'm sure. So I would echo that on behalf of the board, the work that our administration does, the folks in transportation, the folks in food services. It's unbelievable going from nobody in school to 11,000 kids in school in one day, and how much that has to ramp up and how much preparation is required to get that done successfully. So I thank all of our staff, and I thank the parents for their patience as we work through some of those challenges on transportation and other issues that we're having as we start school. Any other comments on that? Thank you, Mr. Knives. The next item is 7.02, school board meeting procedures. There's been a lot of discussion about our last meeting, and I've had a lot of different discussions with different board members. I just kind of thought it would be good to have a public discussion. I'm not sure how long this is. I'm not sure how much detail we're going to go into this. I do, and after what we did tonight, I think I might change a little bit that way. I thought we were going to structure the conversation. So at the meeting in the striker, the failing that I think I will say is that we didn't have a good plan. We didn't have a good discussion with the striker center and with the folks involved with security there about how we were going to structure the meeting. I think it kind of caught me by surprise a little bit, and that's my failing. So tonight here we had a good plan. We kind of laid out, this is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to do at the Stryker Center. Or we didn't, certainly we didn't control the doors and advise folks that they had to wear masks when they were in there. There wasn't, I would ask people, but it's not a school building, it's a Stryker Center, so school rules don't necessarily apply, because it's not a school function, it's a school board meeting in the Stryker Center. So the Stryker Center had that, it was their roles that were in place, and there wasn't a lot of support for those rules at that meeting. And I think that's primarily because we didn't have a good plan. And then as the meeting progressed, where we had people coming to the podium that didn't have masks on, and I asked the first one, and it was the medical exception. The second one was religious exception. I decided that they had that there wasn't really any point of asking anybody else to do that because I think they all knew what they were going to say. And as the meeting progressed, we got to where we had about 10 public comments left. I felt, even with the disruptions that were going on in the audience, that just pushing through was probably the best way to do it. I don't think if I had gavelled out that we would have de-escalated it. I think because we didn't have a good plan and we didn't have a good strategy, that would have continued to escalate the tension and the confusion. So that was kind of the decision process that I had when we decided to cut through and to move through. It's cutting the time to manage the 30 minutes of public comments that we have has been a long-standing practice of this school board. We have done it for a long time. Don't know that it works in the environment that we're in now. We advertise 3 minutes, and people come to the meeting expecting 3 minutes. Tonight, several came expecting 2 minutes. I get that too. So I don't know if we want to say, okay, we'll have 2-minute public comments, and then if we have fewer, we can expand it to 3, or if we just want to do 3 and just brace for how long that was going to be there. So my focus during the whole meeting was to try to de-escalate and try to not have too much, not to get through the tension as much as possible. The next time we're in the striker, I think we'll have a better plan. We'll have better coordination with the building. We'll have better coordination with security there, and I think we'll do that. We'll do that better.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Are we having a discussion?
Yes, sir, we are. As soon as I explain what my decision path was for the last meeting, was what my intention was. But if you would like to say something, Dr. Beers, go ahead.
My response
Go ahead.
is we already had policies in place. I read these correctly that gave you the authority to halt any kind of disruptive behavior. I'm trying to understand why we need to have a discussion.
Because I believe
about how we're going to do this, because I thought it was pretty clear in there.
So how would I have halted that at the last meeting?
How would you what?
How would I have halted that at the last meeting?
It's in our policy.
How would I have halted that?
I don't know. You're the chair.
Oh, okay. So my thought was pushing through and getting through the public comment as quick as possible was the best way to get through it. Because I don't think that if I had gavelled out.
So you decided not to follow that policy. Obviously.
You have a point, Dr. Beers?
That we have policies in place.
Correct.
And it clearly says if you have disruptive members of the audience, or they're boisterous or whatever, all of those things that happen.
Right.
It's very clear, if I understand that the chair has the authority to say, you must leave the room. Now, if the police didn't fully understand that, I understand. I understand that, but it's so you ignore. It's as if you ignored that policy. And
so
just
if I
said,
had told someone, "Will you please leave the room?"
finish.
Do you
Let
think
me
they'll get up?
finish.
You didn't let me finish, so I'm just going to say, if I had told somebody to leave the room, do you think they would have got up and left?
I don't. Yeah, they would have. That's our policy.
Okay. Okay.
I don't believe that they would have left. Our policy is also that there would.
No, because you kept saying you recognized their anger. I understand their anger.
I waited for you to stop
Go back
speaking.
and look at the.
Dr. Beers, can I
look at
speak
that,
now?
And you did.
Can you hear me?
I don't think, I'm
don't think you
sorry,
can hear
I
me.
don't think that helped. I don't think that helped diffuse it at all.
Did you want a conversation?
Well, I
Go
want a
ahead, go ahead, Greg.
No, I want a discussion, but I'm trying to understand what the discussion is supposed to be.
Go ahead, Greg.
So, to your question, and you said you thought that they would, I disagree, because they had already told us, many in the room had already told us that they were not going to abide by our rules by clapping, by
gosh.
jeering, okay?
I'd really get in trouble if I said, in certain circumstances, I'm not going to abide by the rules. Well, then you're just going to get arrested.
But knowing that this was on the agenda, I'm prepared to say that I fully supported what our chair did, and I agree that a lot of the problem was on us and our lack of preparation. I also agree that, well, I don't know who I would agree with on this point, but I'm in favor of looking at our 30-minute window for public comment and nixing that. I'm in favor of giving every single speaker 3 minutes. And regardless of the number of speakers that we have,
So it's all right for us to stay
regardless
here
of the
till
number of
midnight
speakers that we
so that
have, I am
everybody
in
gets to
favor that
speak.
every single person does get to speak. Yes, sir.
We can change the 3. The board can change the 3 to 2.
And so that's been the issue,
Yeah,
that the
we could
board
do
has
that.
changed it to meet its whim as far as the public looks at that. The public's perception is that when this board changes the speaking time frame from 3 to 2 to 1.5, depending on the number of speakers, the perception is that we, the board, don't care to hear what the public has to say, depending on what is written
I
on that
totally
speaker
disagree.
card.
I totally
You disagree, but that's what we're hearing.
I don't agree with that at all.
You can disagree all you want. That's what we're
Ms. Young
hearing.
first. Ms. Young?
That's what we're hearing.
Okay, I'll try to speak. First of all, I think the chair did an amazing job last time. I mean, I know people disagree with that. However, under this current situation that's in the United States, and we are not exempt from the things that are going on. My personal opinion is I want to hear every single person speak for 3 minutes. The 30 minutes is arbitrary, isn't it? I mean, somebody decided that 30 minutes is all that you needed. And during the pandemic, I can remember sitting here for over an hour, many nights, listening to people speak, and many of them on the same subject, and I have it in my notes. I mean, I always write notes about the people that are speaking. I personally would like to have that time not allocated. The Board of Supervisors does not have a time limit. I don't know why we have a time limit. I am an elected official. I am responsible to my constituency to listen to their concerns. I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it, but I want to hear it. And so the fact that we have this cap of 30 minutes, which is very arbitrary, I personally would like to do away with that. I would like to listen to every single person, and however the board chose to do that, I would like us to entertain the idea that we serve the public. We're not an entity unto ourselves. And when we start thinking that way, we better take a hard look about what we believe about governance. Governing.
Okay.
Are you going to let me finish? I mean, if we believe that we no longer have to listen to our constituents, then I strongly recommend that anybody that's out there hearing us, you run against us, and I hope you win, because I don't think that we can sit here and say that, well, we're only going to listen to you for 30 minutes. I have never felt that way, and most of the time, I mean, almost the whole time I've been on the school board, except for a few key issues like redistricting, it's been fine. And typically, I'm sure that 30 minutes is going to be fine. But we're in a period of time in our history where we need to listen to people. That's part of our job.
Well, the other part of the policy, it speaks to the language and the behavior of the people that spoke. Time and time again, they violated that behavior. And I don't care if they are angry. When they come into a meeting like that, if you can't express your anger in a respectful, somewhat courteous way, then maybe you need to learn how to control it better. Because I really felt that the meeting just really got away from us. It totally got away from us. With the guffaws and the laughter and the booing and the cheering, it was like a mob, a little mob.
And
And
I
they
didn't.
were reinforcing each other because they're stronger and.
Well, I just didn't think that we had a strategy in place that would have diffused that situation. I'm going to go back to Sandy real quick. Then I'll go to Lisa and Julie. I didn't see you put your hand up. You put your hand up? Okay.
Do you want me to continue?
Go ahead, Sandy.
I wasn't finished. If we're going to be triggered, which is a very popular word nowadays, by somebody being upset, then I think we have the problem. I don't think they have the problem. Are we so? Yes, that's what I'm saying. I was not upset. I would like people to be polite. I would like people to not clap. And those are, Greg read those rules. He read them at the beginning, that there's not supposed to be any kind of clapping or things like that at the beginning of the comment section. But if it happens, I would like us to be gracious enough to not be upset. And I understood everything they said, and I did understand that the meeting wasn't as best prepared as we'd like, but I think that's what this discussion is for. So where are we going from here to the next meeting? Because we're on the 17th of September. Is it the 17th?
21.
It's not the 20th. What day is it? 14 plus?
21.
Yes.
21st.
We're going to have a meeting again. I would like us to be ready to welcome those people that come and talk, and maybe we'll have a much better handle. I mean, tonight, it was very well planned. People were told they had a mask. Those that weren't masked were escorted out of the building. That's a reasonable approach to this.
Well, but let me correct one thing you said. I never said that we don't need to hear from the public. I certainly agree with that. What I'm more concerned about, the way in which the public presented itself. Probably more than anything, it wasn't even so much what they said, how they said it,
Dr.
and
Beers,
the behavior that they exhibited.
do we have any control over that?
What?
Do we have any control over the way somebody presents themselves? I mean, each individual, you look at the 7 of us, we present
So
ourselves.
they can.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm
What
saying.
are you saying?
What I am saying is that maybe we need to exhibit a little bit of patience, a little bit of, I think we need to read the rules, and I think we need to expect civility. That's the word that was used at the end of our meeting last time.
I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, I might even suggest, why don't we just have a third school board meeting each month, and it'll be entirely devoted to the public being able to come in and make their comments.
Can I go through the list? Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, no.
Lisa?
Okay.
I'll come back, Sandy. Lisa?
I don't know where to begin. Just to be clear, I don't think any of us have ever not wanted to hear from the public. And there are multiple ways to communicate with us, and people do that. They call us, they email us, they text us, they Facebook us, they grab us in the grocery store, they grab us at Target. So I have never not been accessible. And when I was chair, I responded to a ton of email every single day and answered as many questions as I could, and then directed people back to administration when I didn't have the answers. So the issue is not that we don't want to hear from people, and the issue is not that we don't agree and we don't want to hear certain things. The issue is civility, and the issue is following our guidelines. I don't know what the Board of Supervisors would do if that kind of rancor existed in their meeting or city council. And then I wonder what kind of behavior we're modeling for our students. So there does need to be civility and there does need to be decorum. I am a little confused, Mr. Chair. I thought we did have a plan. We did touch base because we know that we're living in a volatile world right now, which is scary. I mean, my oldest son said to me tonight, do I need to go to that meeting to make sure you're going to be okay? You know, I am a school board member, and I shouldn't have to worry about my safety.
Right.
I shouldn't have to worry that there are police officers out there. You know, my $400 a month is not enough. That's not why I'm here. So the fact that I worry about my own safety because I have people who are not civil and who are saying ugly things and are not following our protocol is an issue. And what we have in our SOP is the ability for the chair to recess. If I was chair, I would have recessed. I would have. And we discussed that. So I am confused. So tonight we did talk and we had a plan and we secured the building and we ensured that people followed the rules, but also we had people coming in here one at a time. And Stryker, there is the audience and there is the group effect. And as I've said before, the last 2 or 3 meetings, I am concerned about the vitriol and the political, partisan, hyperbolic stuff that's coming to our school board every single meeting that has nothing to do with what we're doing. And that is the essence of what's happening. So we have plans in place. Sandy, what you're suggesting that we listen to everybody in one meeting, we could have a 5 or 6 or 7 or 10-hour meeting. Those meetings have happened across the state. Just because we have a 30-minute time limit doesn't mean that we won't listen to people. They can call us, they can write us, they can give us that information. We have never said, don't give us your information. We want to hear from the public, but we also need to do our business. As it is, our meetings run 4 and 5 hours. So you want to be here 10 hours? So having an arbitrary 30-minute time limit allows us to perform our business in a somewhat timely way. I've been a parent in this division for 20 years, and this board, this body has never not had public comment. And we don't have to. We just have to have public meetings. We do not have to have public comment. And I shouldn't have to be yelled and screamed at. And if people think that I'm offended by that, so be it. I shouldn't have to fear for my safety, and I shouldn't have to ask a police officer to walk me to my car. And that's happened in the past. People have stood around my car. You know, my first year on the board, waiting for me to walk out of a meeting. That is nuts, and that's happening across the country. And the fact that it's a pattern and it's happening across the country tells me that it's not just about WJCC. This is about something else. Oh. And that scares me and alarms me and concerns me for this community.
So a couple of things. We did arrange to have extra security at the meeting at the Stryker. Unfortunately, they were late in arrival and they were substitute security that hadn't been there before. So we didn't have people and we didn't have people at the door who were telling people to wear masks, and so we had a little bit of a failure there as far as the plan for the security. You are absolutely right. I mean, we are not required to have public comment. The General Assembly doesn't have public comment at their meetings. Congress doesn't have public comment at their meetings. We invite public comment here. I want to hear it. I didn't have any issue with anybody who was speaking. Some of them went over the 2 minutes, and we had to kind of push them through. But I didn't have any problem with anybody who was speaking. It was the disruption afterwards that was the problem. So with that, I'm going to go to Julie.
We do have rules in our standard operating procedure. We do have rules, but if they're not enforced, then it's as if we don't have any rules. So even tonight, it worked out better for us tonight, but I personally went up to one of the police officers and asked, how exactly is this going to work tonight? And we didn't have a plan until 5 minutes before the meeting, when they told us this is what you need to say, and then this is how we will act. So we didn't have even a plan tonight. until right before the meeting. So I would just say we need to make sure that our plan is in place next week or in 2 weeks as well. It is different being in Stryker than being here. It is different when people have the group kind of mentality of cheering or jeering or being emboldened to disregard your. I felt really embarrassed. Last week was one of those, and I have to say, when the police officer left the chambers and didn't come back for 2 or 3 minutes, I was like, oh, where is he? I want him here, because there is this, it should never be like this. All of us are serving on this board, not because of the big paycheck we're getting to be on the board, but because we care about the children, we care about education, we support public education. Public commentary, to me, is just one portion of what the board does in a meeting. It is important, and I definitely think it's great to have public commentary at every single meeting. I don't want to be in a meeting for 10 hours. I think it makes total sense to have a limit of 30 minutes, which has worked well for a long time, because what happens is you get, and we saw this with redistricting, we've seen it with different issues throughout the year. You get someone to say, we're going to basically commandeer the school board meeting, because all we need to do is you get 10 friends, I'll get 10 friends, I'll get another 10 friends, we'll come in, we'll say the same basic message for 3 minutes, and they'll have to be there listening to it for 3 hours. And that, to me, is an it's not public commentary, it's not like, it's very orchestrated. And so it's not like, I've been sitting through this for 4 years now, and I've seen it happen at different times. So anyway, I would just say I am in support of continuing to have public commentary, but I would recommend that we continue doing what we do. And like even tonight, if you're looking at the cards, it's 16 cards, and you do the math and you're like, okay, we'll give everyone their 3 minutes, whatever. But as long as everyone knows that they're going to need to come to a meeting prepared, that if there's 50 people, they're not going to be able to speak for 3 minutes. They're going to have to adjust their time and get their message across in a shorter amount of time. And that we have some teeth behind our rules. And if they want to just blow off our rules, then they don't need to participate in the public comment section. I would also recommend, if it continues to be bad like this, that we actually move public commentary to the end of our meeting, so that what we can do is get board business out of the way. So we have our board business out of the way, and then we have public commentary. And then if it gets totally out of hand, we can stop the meeting, and our board business is done. So anyway, those are my comments.
Kira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these procedures, these processes are part of our standard operating procedure, which all of us have adopted unanimously every year, right? So they are reviewed every year. So if there's an opportunity to change them, we've all asked it to come back through policy committee, and I know you're working on that. So we have that opportunity to do that as part of that process. If we decide to change our processes, I lament that we've done it in response to what we've experienced in the last meeting. That does not seem like a good reason to change the way we do things. It's not the circumstances in which that I would like. And so I just want to say, I don't want to look back. I want to look forward and talk about this through the lens of the SOP, but with one exception. And, I made a comment that people responded to today about physical presence in the board meeting, because the sort of dramatic way in which everybody left after public comment sent a signal that there was not an interest in listening, but only saying what they had to say and then leaving. So I made an assumption, and we all know that sometimes when you make an assumption, you make an ass out of yourself, right? That's the old truism. So I wanted to acknowledge that and say that it was my assumption that everyone was there to just speak and not listen. So for those people who did go back and listen to the meeting, I apologize for my remarks. Moving forward, though, I think one of the things that I find frustrating, and I would like to say, Mr. Kelly, I agree with you that the General Assembly does not require us to have public comment at all, so it's not a right. It's a privilege that we afford the public, and I do so happily, even when I disagree with what they say. But I think one of the observations I've seen in the community is that somehow there's a belief that if we don't yield to what is said, that somehow we're not listening. And that couldn't be more untrue. The positions that are expressed here deserve our ultimate respect. I think they get our ultimate respect, but they don't necessarily deserve affirmation. I'm sorry, they just simply don't. We hear from hundreds of people, and as Julie said earlier today, the people who are coming here to talk to us are in an extreme minority compared to what I'm hearing right now. And I just think that's important to understand. We live in a country where minority rights are valued, and I support that, and I want to hear, but I just think that has to be said. We do serve the public, but above the public, we serve the students and the parents and the staff, and I think that has to be said. And also I want to echo what Lisa said and say, call us, email us. I have never not returned a phone call or a text. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Please, let's talk. Let's have a conversation, please. We do want to hear. Another thing is when people do have fewer minutes than they expected, please share your remarks with the clerk. We get them. We get those remarks. We want to hear everything that you were prepared to say. I would like that to be in Mr. Dowell's remarks, frankly, so that it's instructed to everybody. Please, if you're not able to complete your remarks, hand them to the clerk. We will get them. We will read them. I am supportive of, and just also, this is the first time I've ever heard such anger over a reduction in minutes. I've been on this board 6.5 years. I, as chair, cut minutes down to a minute on more than one occasion, particularly down over redistricting. We've even said, please don't come back and get your card if you are going to say the same thing as your neighbor, and you can just stand when they talk to demonstrate your volume. So we've done those things to make sure that people are heard, and I've never seen this kind of rancor. So I support 30 minutes. If we want to go over 30 minutes, I also support cutting to 2 minutes or 1 minute, depending on the volume. If we want to go to longer than that, I could support that if we went to one meeting, like you mentioned the Board of Supervisors, Sandy. They do not have public comment at all their meetings, just one. So if we need to go longer. I hear what you're saying, Julie, about doing it at the end of the meeting. And on paper, I like that idea, but philosophically, I can't. Just the same we do board recognitions at the beginning, like having people sit through sometimes some of the work we do is mind-numbing, right? So I can't, that's too hard for me to ask the public to just sit through. Sure, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was going to comment on what you just said. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Historically, comments were given at the end of a meeting. It was only recently one of our former superintendents decided that he wanted to switch things around because he didn't want to do things the way they had been done before. So that's when the comment part started to come earlier in the school board meeting. The other thing is, and I know other school boards do that. They don't have public comment during the work session. They have it during the regular meeting because they don't want time to be taken away from the discussions when we're learning about some new stuff or talking about some new approach, whatever it might be. So I think that's that would be an appropriate compromise to do something. But I really do think, to get back to, especially especially Julie, for what you had said is, yeah, when those cops left the room, I was sitting up there, and there were some really angry people in that room. I kept thinking, okay, if somebody pulls out a plastic gun, I'm going to get underneath the desk. God knows, we know they can make 3D guns out of material. It is not going to trigger any metal detector. Do we even have
metal detectors anyway?
there?
So you're not
even
finished
know.
yet? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just saying, I don't think we should have to put up with that kind of behavior. I really don't.
I mean, I do think that, I do think we should demand a civil conversation. I think, and if we don't get that, I think we need to take action. And we've had a lot of discussion about the idea of calling a recess. And I know there's not agreement around here on whether that should be done, but I just want to say that, I looked up the definition of recess because my understanding is when you call a recess, you leave. And recess is the root, comes from recede, to temporarily withdraw. So when people are not behaving well, I think we call a recess, and I think we recede. We temporarily withdraw, which means to physically remove yourself from the room, to just calm the situation and remove, whether it's a 2-minute recess, a 5-minute recess, a 10-minute recess. But that's what a recess is. So for those of you who think you just stay there, it's a temporary withdrawal, a physical withdrawal, which is why recess in school is outside. So that's what I think we should do. And I think if we have to call 10 recesses in a meeting because people are not behaving as they should, then that's what we need to do.
Ms. Cook, if I could just add to make it clear, I agree with you, and we would never suggest that we would leave or recess because we disagree with someone's comments.
Ever.
It has nothing, zero to do with it.
Not the content
It's
at
not
all.
the content at all. It is the behavior, it's decorum, it's civility, it's process, it's protocol, it's following procedures. It is all of those things and absolutely nothing to do with content.
I want to follow my process by going to Sandy and then Greg, who've been waiting patiently. So go ahead. Are you done?
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point about recess, and I appreciate your saying it has nothing to do with content. It's just behavior.
Sandy?
Well, first of all, I agree with what you've said. Let me just go back. I've never thought that people wanted to leave because of what people were saying. Okay? So if you think that's what I thought, that's not what I'm saying. I just think the only time I feel like I would ever leave is if I felt physically threatened. I did not feel physically threatened. I've said it before. I don't want to leave during public comment section. I don't want to. On the other hand, I also would like for this group to come to some kind of consensus what we're going to do. Yes, we do receive emails. Yes, we do receive text. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of time to answer those things or to talk to people or email, and I don't think all of them are sent to Jim. Sometimes they're sent to us individually. I think my concern is the perception. Perception is everything. Perception, it is. The perception that we're not listening, the rolling of the eyes of some of our members, the turning the back of some of our members on comment, that doesn't help anything. It doesn't help the person who's speaking. They feel disrespected. That's us. That's not them. On the other hand, I would like them to be civil. I would like every person to be civil. I don't think that's going to happen in this day and age, though I think a little bit of patience on our part, and this is so temporary, I think I don't know how temporary is. I thought COVID would be done by now. But I think we have a nation of frustration right now, and I think that's what we're seeing. And it's spilled over into our school board meetings. As Lisa said, it's nationwide. On the other hand, I don't want to have a 10-hour, as Julie said, a 10-hour meeting, but I would like us to come to some way of listening to people that come here and present themselves, which is very difficult to do for most people, to come here and speak publicly. Most people, that's not something that's in their bailiwick. That's not common, and a lot of the people that come have really probably gone way out of their comfort zone. So I think we need to think about that too. But I don't know that I want comment section at the end, but you said that Dr. Beers said that was done by some.
For my time.
Yeah, because I mean, the whole time I've been here, we've had public comment section at that time.
Right.
But I would like us to somehow make sure that the people that come to speak, that we respect them.
Greg?
Mr. Chair, hearing a lot, and Ms. Cook, you're right. You know, at the beginning of the year, we all agreed to a standard operating procedure, and this is one of those procedures that we all signed off on and agreed to. I'll be honest, speaking for myself, still being the new guy, almost said kid, new guy on the block. I have wondered silently, not asked you, not asked anybody else, but kind of wondered silently, you know, what's that 30 minutes about? Where did that matriculate from? Why are we doing it? We don't adhere to it. I cannot recall a time that we've adhered where we've cut off public comment at 30 minutes. What we have done that I've seen is we've looked at the number of speakers and adjusted the time allotted to a number of, to the group as a number of speakers to fit more tightly into that 30 minutes if we can, and then if we can't, they do still get to speak. That's what I've seen. So from my perspective, I've often wondered silently, you know, where that 30 minutes come from, why, what benefit does it have, but I've never raised a question. The question's raised now, as far as I'm concerned. From my perspective, the question's raised now, and it is in two parts. I hear the board when we say that it is not about the subject matter, that the group, we can see the group coming in, the group is going to address, that it is not about the subject matter that dictates us moving the bar down from 3 minutes to 2 minutes or 1.5. And I get that. I understand that. I'm a part of those conversations when we look at, you know, are we going to move it down from 3 minutes to 2 minutes? But the public isn't. It is about perception, and I think the perception has worked against us in that front. And that's one of the main reasons why we had so much vitriol in the last meeting, was because the public saw it one way, and it wasn't the way that they should have seen it. We weren't transparent in why we were changing those things, and I believe that going forward, I just cannot pretend like I can't hear you speaking, Dr. Beers, and I'm really trying to, but I was very quiet when you were speaking.
I'm just waiting for you to finish so I can.
I was very quiet when you were speaking. You are complaining about the very behavior that you are presenting right now.
I'm sorry.
It's the same behavior.
You can't even begin to think my behavior.
I do, sir. I do. Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Please let me continue.
Why is it only this group?
Can I continue?
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I am asking the board to consider a change in procedure from what we did agree to at the outset of the school year. Understanding that it is different from what has, quote unquote, been done for the longest time, because we are living in a different environment right now where the public needs to see that their voices are heard and considered, and that they're not going to be shut off. Us changing that time frame from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, going back and forth, is confusing for the public. I'm sitting here wondering, I hope they got the I hope they got the instructions, because I'm certain they didn't hear what I just said. I hope they know that they've got 3 minutes. You know, I hope they know that, you know, this is being cut down to being stopped at 30 minutes. I hope they know that they're required to wear a mask even as they're speaking at the podium, because I'm saying that in here. I think we need consistency in our instructions, consistency in our procedures for public speaking. I am asking that we consider doing away with the 30 minutes. I understand that that could turn into a very long meeting. I am not one that doesn't get that doesn't have other obligations. I'm missing my son's first baseball practice in the last 2 years that he's gotten to play. I'm missing my wife's volleyball game where she's coaching. I'm missing my daughter's first volleyball game that she's gotten to play, being that War Hill quarantine volleyball team. I understand what's at stake when we're asking or entertaining the idea of allowing the public to speak for longer than 30 minutes. But that's what I'm asking for, and I think that's what the public doesn't necessarily have a right to. That's been clear. But I think it's our responsibility. It's my responsibility to be here and be willing to hear them. Ms. Hummel, you mentioned moving the public comment section to the end of the meeting. I would not be in favor of moving all of public comment to the end. There's so much of the business that every so often they want to interject on, and I think that that would be unfair to move it to the end after the business has been concluded. But I wonder what the board here, and Ms. Hummel, you would think about having perhaps the first 30 minutes of public comment taken at the where we currently have it at the beginning of the meeting. This was a suggestion we heard earlier in the week. And then after that 30 minutes, everybody that's remaining would need to speak after, at the end of the board meeting, towards the end of the board meeting.
Asked me, I think it's more of a matter of I just have a difference of opinion about the fact that I have seen 30, 40 people coming before the board wanting their 3 minutes each and then adjusting things down. Like, that has been a situation in the past, and it has been a practice of this board, at least for 5 years I've been on the board. It's been a practice of the board to have public commentary be somewhat limited to 30 or 40 minutes, because otherwise it quickly, depending on a controversial subject, and there have been controversial subjects from drug testing to redistricting to, there have been controversial subjects, and you get so that hours. I mean, it could get ridiculous. It's why some of those school board meetings go on till 1 o'clock in the morning. And I just think it's reasonable for the public to understand that we're public servants, but we've got other board stuff to do, and we've got to have a decent amount of time for a board meeting that shouldn't go on till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And the public should be able to adjust and get their message across 1 minute or three minutes. I have never seen us ever cut below a minute, like ever. So you can get your message across in less than 3 minutes and still say your piece, let the board know what you're thinking, without having a meeting that runs on till 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't think you're taking away people's ability to express themselves by giving them, it's almost like be succinct and get your point across, and you can get your point across in 1 minute or 3 minutes. You don't need to stretch it out to the whole 3 minutes for me to know what you're thinking.
And I appreciate that. I am here asking for 3 minutes, but what I'm really looking for is consistency in the process, consistency in what we are providing the public as far as speaking time. You know, if 3 minutes is too much, if the board thinks that 3 minutes is too much, I just feel like we need to provide the public with a clear understanding of when they get here, this is what they're going to be allowed to do within a reasonable frame of time. If it's 2 minutes, if we're asking them going forward, and that's the consistent time frame that we give them, I would be okay with that. And I think that in time, our public will be okay with that. We saw that this evening. Many of them thought they had 2 minutes, and they prepared for 2 minutes. They were surprised when they had 3 minutes. That is the surprise element that troubles me, and I think really troubles most of the public. Thank you.
Dr. Beers?
Well, all I was going to say is the last couple of meetings, it's really been the first time I can remember, and I've been on the board 6 years now. We've had lots of public discussion about a lot of different issues over the years. I can't remember one instance in any of those times, and some of them were really controversial, like redistricting and some other kinds of things. I don't remember anybody ever saying, well, wait a minute, it said 3 minutes here. I don't understand why. Nobody ever said, you're not letting me finish. They all knew that if it was 2 minutes, it was 2 minutes because there were so many of them, or it would be 3 minutes. But they did not get up and berate the chair or the board because they didn't understand the rules. All those hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 6 years would get up, and some of them would go overtime. But and sometimes they apologized, sometimes they didn't like it, but they were not disrespectful or say, well, you're not giving, I have my rights, this is my right. Well, actually it's not. If we've said you have 2 minutes, you have 2 minutes. And to me, it put the chair in an untenable position. I mean, I really believe that sincerely. It was like a shot from nowhere. It was clearly orchestrated, and they were not going to. That group was not going to take no for an answer. So I'm backtracking and basically saying that probably was the best thing to do. One thing, the other thing I will say. I have constituents, and I have spoken to people in my neighborhood. They've said, you know, I was really going to come to the meeting because I really support, you know, whatever, the mask or whatever it was, but he said, but after watching that, I don't think I'm coming. I don't want somebody booing me. I'm not going to do that. The only ones we're going to hear from, if this continues, is this group who are clearly, the thing is, it's obviously orchestrated because the same kinds of language are being used by citizens all across the country in different school board meetings. So it isn't something that just popped up in James City County. And you know, I'm not naive enough to realize that, oh no, it's just, it just sort of sprung up and that's just the way they feel. It's like, no, they're all, you know, they're using the same language. And you know, I sent out an article that clearly it's something that is happening all across the country. It just started happening with us. But I'm going to be really upset if that behavior continues and it prevents or inhibits other citizens from coming in and addressing the board.
Yeah, I'm going to totally agree with you. I mean, that behavior is intimidation to other folks who.
I mean, in my email right now is from people. I mean, I'm getting an email about I won't come. Thank you for saying that. I mean, yeah.
Because that is part of what that does is it serves to intimidate others who might have a different opinion, which is our democracy is founded on different opinions and us resolving those and coming to a consensus or negotiated settlement or something. So I agree with you and then that was like I said at the meeting. I pushed through, but the next meeting I might make a different decision. And we had a little bit different decision tonight. Contrary, we did have a plan. We controlled the door. There were 3 folks who didn't have masks who wanted to come in that we did not let in the building.
Jim, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
One thing, though, I agree with you up to a point. If we have a policy that says this is in this kind of a setting or situation, this is what you're supposed to do, and you choose not to do that, I don't understand why we have the policy then.
Oh, well, the circumstances that we had at that meeting, I didn't think we had control. And so I didn't think that we had the ability to control.
Got it. I
understand.
Okay.
So we
now
did.
Now you know that you do.
Yeah. So so the next time we go to Stryker, which will be on the 21st, we'll have people at the doors at 5:45 or 6 saying, "Put your mask on. You got to have your mask on." And so that is my intention for the next meeting. I guess to kind of draw this to trying to get us to a conclusion so we can get out of here before midnight. Is I'll get to you. So is that we would have, the Stryker would control the doors, that you have to wear masks, that we have, if we do have to gavel out, if we do have to clear the room and have people line it up, that we have the security there with a strategy and a plan to do that. Not have that at the last meeting. And so I just think that that's what we need to have going forward. Now, the question about 30 minutes and, 30 minutes has been our practice. And so, that's what we want to continue doing going forward. We can do that. I just want to make sure that as a board that we have, will you give me a second? I just want to make sure that we have a consensus so that when we do 30 minutes, so we do 30 minutes, or if we're going to do an hour, if we're going to do whatever.
Well, we're going
to
do what the SOP says until we change the SOP.
Lisa.
Okay, and so to that point, which is what I was getting all antsy, and back to Mr. Dowell's question, and so and to what Ms. Cook just said, what's in our SOP? So 30 minutes. Getting back to your point, the public is surprised. We changed it from 2 to 3. When I was chair, after sitting through hours of public comment, I reduced it to 1 because there was such volume. And so we did tweak, our board clerk did tweak to make it clear and transparent that we allow for 30 minutes of public comment, and it may be reduced. So I am all for keeping it 30 minutes and making it very transparent that based on the volume, time may be cut. And I don't know, that is transparency right there. And we have to be able to conduct our business, and I think it serves no good purpose to be here until 1 o'clock in the morning to hear the same thing over and over, when quite frankly, a lot of it is just a national mantra. It's not.
And there are other opportunities to communicate with us.
Lots of ways, and they do, right. To that point, lots of ways.
But yeah, so I'm just saying that the SOP comes through this policy committee. Policy committee should make a recommendation to us, then we should make a change, then we should execute the change. So as long as the SOP is in place that's in place, we stick with what we're doing.
Andy.
I mean, I think this discussion, for me, and I could live with that idea that we will follow the SOP until it comes before the board, but I would like this board to give some direction to the policy committee what we are willing to live with. I think that 30 minutes is, again, as I said before, is very arbitrary. I mean, I do totally agree. I think one of the main problems that I see is people coming with 3 minutes and then being cut back. I think having a consistent time, whether it's 2 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes, whatever we decide, I think that would be helpful to people. But I would like us to give some direction to the policy committee about what, going forth, what will come before us when we have to approve that.
Right, the arbitrariness of the 30 minutes is it covers 97.5% of our meetings, you know?
Yeah.
It's the other 2.5% that kind of go off the rails, where the 30 minutes doesn't necessarily work to give everybody their 3 minutes. And so, you know, when we did the public comment during virtual, and they called in, we couldn't cut them off after a minute because, you know, but when we came here that day, we knew how many we were going to have, and we understood that. So, really.
So we do have the SOP talking about it in the policy meeting, and so I think Mr. Dow and I probably disagree on the public comment. Like, I think the way it is, he doesn't. Is there a feeling before we go into that meeting, is there a consensus on the meeting time? If we were to keep it the way it is, how many of you agree with keeping it the way it is?
I could agree with more than one thing.
Okay.
I mean, no, I mean, seriously, like, that is a thing I could vote for.
You know, to have everybody have 3 minutes with no time limit, how many people agree with that?
I'm in favor of a time limit for an individual, no time limit on public.
Okay.
Whether it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes for an individual.
How many people?
I agree with that.
I would go to an hour.
Okay.
60 minutes. I mean, 30 minutes can be too short sometimes. 60 minutes, I think everything that we've had this year so far, 60 minutes would have covered it. And I can willing to invest an hour. I don't want to invest 4. Andy?
I mean, the other thing we could do, if we want to stay within the 30 minutes, is have, I do believe one of the biggest problems with, the one person that was very angry about being cut off, I do think if we could reduce it to 2.5 minutes, that would let 15 people speak during a 30-minute period of time.
Right.
That's an option for us to look at also.
Or going to one meeting and then having less of a limit.
I think I could go for that too. Our work sessions, no public comment, and then the main meeting have unlimited time for comment.
So I don't know how do you want to let Greg and me want to pose a different, your ideal way of handling this, and then we combine all the different options and we talk about it at our next.
So one thing which I could throw out there is that we look at what other school systems do and just see what they do for public comment.
Looking at you.
And just look at our region and see what other school systems in our region do, and then maybe pluck a couple of big ones up in Northern Virginia and just see what they do and just see how that works.
I'm not
recognizing
interested.
that it's changing now.
And I'm not interested in having a school board meeting go until 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm just saying, like.
We're working on it right now. But I got you. I'm with you.
I understand looking at the surrounding school systems, but we're a pretty unique school system, and we're not like Hampton, we're not like Newport News, we're not like Gloucester. So I
might be more like Albemarle.
I don't know. I think we just decide, because I know some school systems only have public comment at one meeting. Some school systems have it at both meetings. Some school systems
That's fair.
have no public comment.
Well, in some schools, yeah.
Now, the other question, I guess, would be, so 30 minutes. I'm perfectly happy with 2 minutes for 30 minutes. I think if you really have something to say and you organize your thoughts, you can say an awful lot in 2 minutes.
So, but right now our SOP says 3 minutes 30, 3 minutes 30. And so, whichever comes first, I guess. So maybe we work with Beth to adjust the card that says we have 30 minutes, because right now it's a card that says you have 3 minutes, but we may reduce it later, and so we say we have 30 minutes and we may reduce the time to not less than a minute, but no more than 3. Something just to kind of go have the public be aware of that when they're walking in the door, that's a limitation. Sandy?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go back to my previous comment. Where people that come in, a lot of them are not used to public speaking.
Sure.
And so they come, I mean, tonight, I think every one of the people that came and spoke tonight were very prepared. I mean, almost all of them, if not all of them. I think that's where having a consistent amount of time benefits the public. So I really don't like the idea of going up and down. I prefer a consistent time. I'm not against having the time be less, but I think that it's important that the time remain consistent.
Lisa?
So I agree. Consistency is great. I just don't know how you can be consistent and have a limit. And I believe in limits, just like I limit my children, and just like there are limits and rules in a classroom. No teacher would allow their students to behave the way the gallery did at our last board meeting. And so again, as a mom and as a school board member, I think we should model best practice. And so it is worrisome to me that we allowed that to happen, that no classroom. If a teacher managed a classroom that way, we would take issue with that. And so if we have 30 minutes, I think just like we're flexible and we have to pivot and things change, I think the community has to understand that they might have to change. And we can encourage the public to always have your comments in writing. And if you don't get through them, give them to us. Miss Beth gets them to us and we read them. And quite frankly, the people who spoke tonight are the same people that have been coming since June. So they're the same people saying the same thing over and over. So extending that to 1 o'clock in the morning, having the same people say the same thing over, this is a national issue, and I don't see it going away, and I don't see it getting any better. And so I don't see how changing how we do business, how we've done business for a long, long time in response to
Well, I mean,
behavior.
I don't want to take a specific group off the picture, because I mean, you can have this discussion with Mass, you could have this with CRT, you could have this with redistricting, you could have this with all kinds of different topics that come before the board of going over the.
But we are having it in response to that meeting, which is what I said at the beginning. I lament that that's what we're doing. Like, I'd rather have this as a conversation as part of the SOP and how we do business as opposed to being reactive. Which is what we're being.
We are being reactive. And
Well, I would have had to have reacted at the last meeting. That would have been reactive as well. So, I mean, I just didn't think that we had, when I looked at the situation, I just didn't think I had any alternatives. Because I don't think that it would have helped to de-stress or de-escalate the tension in the room, because we didn't have a plan. The next time we go to Stryker,
I'm talking about
we have a
having
plan.
this conversation as a direct result of that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think it was important that we did.
Yeah, I'm responding to your comment that we shouldn't be talking about this in response to a specific group, but we are. That's my point.
I am not. I'm talking about a public comment in general. Sandy?
I mean, I thought we'd move past the comments of the individuals, because there have been other groups that have come before us, and
Right.
you hear the same thing over and over and over again. It wasn't just this group. So I thought we had moved on to a general discussion that was going forth what was going to happen.
Right.
So that's where I am at this point. I'm not
Can I
worried
just
about-
clarify? I would say the same thing about the redistricting people. It's the same thing. When you're hearing the same thing over and over, allowing a meeting to go for up to 1 o'clock in the morning serves no purpose. So people
Don't want to go till 1 in the morning.
we're going to have a limit, and so you can't tell people you're going to always get 3 minutes if we're going to limit the amount of public comment. Like, you can't mathematically, you can't do that.
So going into the 21st, we have a strategy, better strategy for the door. We have a better strategy to control the room if we have to gavel out. If we get to the situation where we had the disruption as we did at the last meeting, we will gavel out, and my intention would be that we would gavel out, clear the room, line the speakers up in the hall one by one like we do here and have them come in and speak. We will also, our SOP says right now says 30 minutes, and so we will change the speaker cards to say we allow 30 minutes, and we're going to adjust your time as necessary to fill that and go from there.
One more comment.
Sure.
Again, I guess just making the point to the broader community, because I don't want anyone to think that we don't want to hear them. So we have for years had the 30-minute. And so it is a service that we do to our community members who come when we cut your time. Because we could just say, we've got 30 minutes and the first 5 of you or 10 of you or whatever that math is, the first 10 of you get to go and the rest of you don't.
It's 10, by the way.
It's 10. Okay, I'm tired. I haven't slept in a month. But so, and then no one else gets to go. And so it's in response to wanting to hear as many community members as possible that we adjust the time. That's why we do it. Because we could just say, we're done. The first 10 get in, the rest of you don't.
Well, and when 100 people come, we cut it to a minute, and we're there for 100 minutes. I mean, so, and we've done that.
Yes.
And I still say that the disruption is meant to intimidate those who have a different opinion, and that's what we need to avoid.
Yes. It was a sad day when there were 3 citizens who were booed, and weird music was being played when they spoke to support the work of this division.
Right. So with that, that's kind of the strategy that we'll have going on the 21st. And with that, can we move on? Andy.
I mean, so we still haven't decided what's going to happen between Julie and Greg when they meet to talk about the SOPs.
They're going to make a recommendation.
Okay, and so.
Right. And I think, and it's the recommendation that what they've got for so far is it's all over the board.
But that means it's incumbent upon us to call Greg and call Julie and say, here's what I can support, and this is the range with which I can vote. So then they can synthesize all of that and make a recommendation to us.
And please do that by 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Okay. Gotcha. Tomorrow morning? It's not tomorrow morning yet, but it will be shortly.
I will email you tonight.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, we can
No, you're gonna
hold that portion. I don't know what you want to do, Ms. Hummel.
I think we have a general idea.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I've heard a lot.
Am I not clear?
Everyone's clear.
I think we've had our SOP meeting.
No, there's a lot more.
I know. I got a list.
So can I go to approve of personnel agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the personnel agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Owenby. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Beers.
Well done.
Is there any discussion of the personnel agenda as presented this evening? Ms. Aller.
Ms. Owenby.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye, thank you. 8.02, approval of release from compulsory attendance cases number R2203, R2204, R2205, R2206, and R2207. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you, Mrs. Cook and Mrs. Young, for that succinct motion. Any discussion? Dollar?
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Ms. Ownby.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye. That takes us to 9.01, board members' comments. Anybody want to lead off?
I have no comments.
Okay, Ms. Hummel led off. Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to inform the public that the school boards in Virginia do not have taxing authority. So I just want to be clear that.
I have what?
Taxing authority. So the concept
Sorry,
of
I couldn't hear.
taxation without representation is not possible from the school boards. I'd also like to say that just in terms of Virginia's ranking, we don't, I don't believe we rank at the 50th in anything, but we rank in the bottom 10 for funding and the top 10 for outcomes, which I would argue is probably unsustainable. But just for the person who is curious about ranking, we rank well for student achievement, very poorly for funding. Dr. Herron, to you and your team, I loved the opening video with the principals' voices, and at the end with the mascots. I thought that was just remarkable, and thank you for doing that. It was a great way to start the new year. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, I just want to sort of double down on my commitment to equity and just be really clear that it's about equitable educational opportunity, not equal outcomes. But it's also focused, in addition to students of color, also special ed students, English language learners, homeless students, and students who are living in poverty. So equity is a big topic, and I support it completely, totally, and without hesitation, always. Thank you.
We can text, but we can't tax.
I heard text. Yeah.
That's what I heard too.
I heard text.
I knew she meant tax.
Yeah.
What did I say?
No, you said tax.
Oh, yeah, you can't
We
tax.
all heard text.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah.
Ms. Young?
We can't tax.
Well, one of the things I noticed as the outcome of the pandemic, I looked at those principals, I don't know a lot of them.
No, right?
I mean, I looked at them, I recognized some, and I thought, but who are those people? And we really have to get back in the schools. That's all I can say as a school board. I've missed that as part of our role of being able to visit and be within the schools and see kids. I would really, really like to start doing that again as soon as possible. I want to thank our board members tonight for our discussion. This board is if nothing, a board with opinions, which I respect. I mean, I don't always agree, but I appreciate the fact that we are strong. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Dr. Beers?
I really don't have much to say. I guess I would say is we all feel strongly and have strong views about how to go about doing the business of school board members with our school system, and we may not agree with each other. For the most part, I recognize and appreciate that. Hope that we can continue to work together and find some closure on some of the things that we're concerned about right now.
I just want to say, to be perfectly transparent, I don't have strong feelings about anything. So, but I did want to respond to some of our public commenters tonight. So in response to the school board has the ability to have committees, we do have committees. We have citizen committees. We have one that responds to career technical education, and Ms. Young serves on that. And we have a special education advisory committee where we have citizens and parents who have students with special needs who advise this body. We have a student advisory committee where our own students advise this board. So we do utilize that. To the folks who were talking about vocational education, we all know how important that is. And because we do not have the ability to tax and raise our own revenue, I would encourage folks who want different vocational options to talk to the Board of Supervisors and City Council. So as a division, because of the size of our division and because of our resources, we opted to be a part of a regional vocational program, which is New Horizons. But we also want to grow more options for our students, and so we've invested in more career and technical education and credentialing here in WJCC. But I encourage folks who come and share information to also bring us solutions. I know back in the day when we had families who wanted to have the Ox Gym at Lafayette, they came and brought solutions. And so I think if all of us work together, maybe we can make solutions. But at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with money, and money is limited, and we can't raise taxes. And then Ms. Cook stole my thunder, but I'm just going to repeat it again with regard to equity. I'm concerned that the word equity has been turned into something foul and nefarious and horrible, and it's not. And so my background, my whole adult career was working with students with developmental disabilities, and then ultimately with the adults. And so like our one speaker tonight who has a senior, there are no services and supports. Virginia does rank near bottom for services and supports for people with developmental disabilities. There's nothing. So that young man who's going to graduate from WJC schools will graduate to absolutely nothing. And so equity is about access. Maybe we just need to change the word. People are confused. Students with disabilities, students, English language learners, students living in poverty, students with mental health issues need different support to access the curriculum. My kid with dyslexia needed to have additional reading support so he could access the general curriculum. So people are just confused. Maybe I'm confused. The word equity is not nefarious. It is not. It is about helping all of our students, all of our blueberries, right? Because we take all of the students, the ripe ones, the small ones, the big ones, all of them, and we help them access the curriculum. And we cannot do that unilaterally. We need to do it. We need to meet every student where they're at. And I appreciate our division's laser focus on that in the face of a minority, small minority, but loud people who are concerned about a word that they don't truly understand as it relates to impacting our students. I'm not passionate, and I don't have an opinion about anything.
Okay. Mr. Dow.
It was really very cool, heartwarming. It's probably a better word to use for the photo montage of first week classes, and don't often go back there, but it took me back to that moment when I was that small, long time ago, and it took me to, it made me realize how, I guess, insulated I was, protected I was, and I hope that these students are just as protected from all of our business, right? I can't imagine what the hot topics were for the school board that I attended, Lynchburg City Schools, and but I never knew any of it. I just enjoyed going to school. I enjoyed seeing my teachers, seeing my classmates, and I hope that that's the experience that our students are getting. I guess I'm speaking to parents that care about the education that their students are getting, that they not steal as they're advocating for their student, for the best that they believe is for their student, that they're not also stealing the joy from their student in the home, because they love school. My kids, they love school, and gosh, they don't want me to be talking about school board meetings. So I'm really grateful to the work that Mr. Kiever, Dr. Herron, you and your staff are doing. Week in, week out, weekends, over summers, no breaks, talking about taking an hour or two here and letting us know about the hour that you're not going to be working. I'm grateful for it. I think that there are more families that are grateful for your work and we hear from, and you deserve to hear from them too. So thank you, and thanks for protecting our children.
Thank you, Mr. Dell. So I don't really have a whole lot to say after what everybody else has said, but I do want to say congrats to our teacher staff, our operations team, and everybody else, and especially our students as they start the second week of school. It's great to be in the classroom, and it's great to see kids at work in the halls and on the athletic fields, and it's great to try to get somewhere back to what our current normal is. So it was great to see all those pictures and the videos. That was wonderful. I do want to thank the board for their conversations tonight and forwarding their thoughts. At the end of the day, everybody but Lisa is passionate and has an opinion. But at the end, we all care about our students, and we all want to do what's right for our students, and we can all move forward and continue to work together. And I appreciate every board member's position and willingness to go do that. So thank you. So with that, upcoming events, the policy committee meets in a couple of minutes in the virtual in room 300, the annex, at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Special Education Advisory Committee meets September 9th at 6:30 virtual. The School Liaison Committee meets September 16th at 8 o'clock virtual. And the school board candidate briefing with those folks who are running for school board is September 17th at 8 o'clock here at room 300 at the annex. Upcoming meetings, September 21st at 6 o'clock at the Stryker Center. We have a closed session, followed by at 6:30 as the regular meeting, also at the Stryker Center. And on October 5th at 6 o'clock, we're here, room 300 in the annex for a closed session, followed by 6:30 for a work session and action items, also on October 4th here at the annex. I think we're good with setting the agenda. And without objection, we are adjourned.